You've been taught that peace comes from understanding, from knowing what this moment means, from finding the right explanation. But if that were true, why does the mind keep asking why this is happening, what this is for, what should come next? Why do answers bring relief only for a moment before the questions return? The truth is this: peace does not come from answers. Peace appears when you stop demanding them. Buddhist teachings have pointed to this for thousands of years, not through belief or blind faith, but through direct experience. They teach that the moment does not need to explain itself, that life is complete before meaning, and that suffering begins the moment we insist that everything must make sense. Tonight, as you listen, something will begin to settle. The need to figure things out will soften, the tension in your thoughts will loosen, and the mind will stop arguing with what is here. You will feel peace, not because you found an answer, but because you stopped asking. This is not about giving up or avoiding life. This is about allowing the moment to be what it is, without pressure, without demand. This is not just something to hear, it is something to experience. Peace appears when you stop demanding answers from the moment. The moment you stop asking for answers, something loosens. There is a quiet gap after the introduction, a pause where the mind expects the next explanation to arrive. That pause is important. It is the first place where you can notice how quickly the mind reaches forward, how uncomfortable it feels to stay with not knowing, and how strong the urge is to replace silence with clarity. From here we move gently deeper, not to give answers, but to look closely at what happens when the need for answers takes over the present moment. There is a subtle tension that appears whenever life feels unclear. It is not always loud. Often it feels like restlessness, like a small pressure behind the eyes, like the sense that something is unfinished. The mind reacts almost instantly. It wants to label what is happening, explain it, and place it inside a familiar story. This reaction feels natural, even intelligent. After all, understanding has helped us survive. Knowing why fire burns or why storms come has kept us safe. But there is a point where this useful ability turns against us. The moment we demand clarity from every experience, curiosity slowly changes into control. At first, the need for clarity looks harmless. You tell yourself you just want to understand your emotions. You just want to know why a relationship feels different. You just want to know why you feel tired, empty, or distracted. These questions sound reasonable. They even sound responsible, but watch closely what happens next. The present moment, which was once alive and moving, becomes a problem to solve. Instead of feeling what is here, the mind steps back and starts investigating. It watches from a distance, it analyzes, it compares. In that movement, something important is lost. The present moment does not unfold in neat explanations. It is messy, layered, and often unclear. Feelings overlap, thoughts contradict each other, sensations come and go without asking permission. When the mind insists on immediate understanding, it interrupts this natural flow. It freezes the moment and demands that it make sense right now. This demand is where the violence begins. Not physical violence, but a quiet inner force that pushes against reality instead of meeting it. This kind of violence is subtle because it feels like effort, not harm. It feels like trying to help yourself. But notice how the body reacts when you demand clarity. The breath becomes shallow. The jaw tightens. The mind speeds up. There is a sense of pressure, as if the moment is failing a test. Life is no longer something you are part of. It becomes something standing in front of you, waiting to be judged. Curiosity, in its pure form, is open and gentle. It says, "What is this?" Without needing an answer right away, it stays close to experience. It listens. Control, on the other hand, says, "Tell me now." It does not trust the process of unfolding. It believes that without immediate understanding, something is wrong. When curiosity turns into control, the mind stops receiving and starts forcing. This is why the insistence on clarity often creates more confusion, not less. The mind keeps digging for answers, but the ground it is digging into is alive. Each moment changes as you touch it. By the time you think you understand, the experience has already moved on. This creates a sense of chasing your own thoughts, always one step behind, always slightly dissatisfied. The harm deepens when this habit becomes automatic. Over time, the mind learns to question everything before allowing it. Joy is questioned. Sadness is questioned. Calm is questioned. Even peace is questioned. Why do I feel calm? Will this last? What does this mean? The moment is never allowed to simply be. It must pass through the filter of explanation before it is accepted. This constant filtering creates distance between you and your own life. There is also fear hidden inside the need for clarity. Not always obvious fear, but a quiet discomfort with uncertainty. Uncertainty feels unsafe to the mind because it cannot predict what comes next. The demand for answers is an attempt to build solid ground where there is none. But life does not move on solid ground. It moves like water. When you try to freeze it into certainty, it resists. This resistance is felt as tension. The more you push for understanding, the more the moment seems to slip away. You might notice this when strong emotions arise. Sadness appears, and immediately the mind asks why. Anger appears, and the mind wants a cause, a reason, a story. Instead of allowing the emotion to move through the body, it is held in place by analysis. The energy that wanted to flow becomes stuck. This is why emotions often last longer when we overthink them. The present moment is harmed not because questions are asked, but because they are demanded. There is a difference. A gentle question can coexist with experience. A demand replaces experience. When you demand clarity, you stop listening. You interrupt. You assume that the moment must explain itself in your language, on your timeline, in a way that fits your understanding. This assumption places the mind above life, as if reality must answer to you. Over time, this creates a subtle sense of separation. You begin to feel like an observer of your life rather than a participant. You watch yourself living instead of living. Every experience becomes material for thought instead of something to be felt directly. This separation often shows up as numbness. People say they feel disconnected, empty, or distant, even when nothing is obviously wrong. The issue is not a lack of meaning, it is an excess of interpretation. When clarity is forced, presence is sacrificed. Presence requires patience. It requires allowing things to remain unfinished. It requires trusting that understanding, if it comes, will come in its own time. The demand for immediate answers breaks this trust. It tells the nervous system that something is urgent, that something must be fixed right now. The body responds as if there is danger, even when there is none. This is why overthinking feels exhausting. It is the body staying in a low-level state of alert, waiting for a conclusion that never fully satisfies. Each answer leads to another question. Each explanation opens another gap. The mind promises relief once clarity is reached, but clarity keeps moving further away. Meanwhile, the present moment is missed again and again. The violence of needing clarity also shows up in relationships. When someone behaves in a way you do not understand, the mind rushes to explain it. You create stories about their motives, their intentions, their flaws. These stories feel like clarity, but they are often guesses dressed as certainty. Instead of staying open to the living person in front of you, you interact with your explanation of them. This creates distance, misunderstanding, and conflict. The same happens with yourself. You create an identity based on explanations. I am this way because of that. I feel this because of my past. These stories can be useful, but when held too tightly, they limit growth. Life keeps changing, but the story stays the same. New experiences are forced to fit old explanations. When they do not fit, discomfort arises and the mind tries even harder to regain clarity. There is also a loss of humility in the demand for answers. Not arrogance in a loud sense, but a quiet belief that everything should be understandable, that if something does not make sense, it has failed. This belief ignores the vastness of life. It ignores how little the mind can actually grasp. Peace does not come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing what does not need to be known. When the demand for clarity relaxes, something surprising happens. The moment feels richer, not poorer. Without the pressure to explain, sensations become clearer. Sounds are sharper. Feelings are more honest. You begin to notice details that were previously overshadowed by thought. The body relaxes because it no longer has to prepare for a conclusion. This does not mean abandoning intelligence or insight. It means putting them in their proper place. Understanding becomes something that arises naturally, not something forced. Sometimes clarity comes later, after the experience has passed. Sometimes it comes in a form you did not expect, and sometimes it does not come at all, and nothing is lost. The present moment is not a puzzle to be solved. It is an event to be lived. When curiosity remains soft, it supports presence. When it hardens into control, it damages it. This damage is not dramatic. It happens quietly, through habits of thought that feel normal. That is why it goes unnoticed for so long. Learning to notice the violence of needing clarity is not about stopping questions. It is about feeling the energy behind them. Are they coming from openness or from tension? From interest or from fear? From trust or from urgency? This sensitivity changes how you relate to your mind. You begin to see that not every question deserves an answer right now. As this understanding settles, the relationship with uncertainty begins to change. Uncertainty no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like space. Space where life can move freely. Space where peace can appear without being explained. And from this space, the next layer of peace begins to reveal itself, not as something you figure out, but as something that was already here once the pressure was removed. As the pressure to understand loosens, something quieter begins to show itself. After the struggle with clarity softens, there is a brief, unfamiliar stillness. The mind does not rush forward as quickly. The need to name, solve, or conclude weakens. In that small opening, peace does not arrive like a reward. It is already there, unnoticed, because it was never something you had to reach. There is a common belief that peace is the result of answers. That once the right explanation is found, once the confusion is resolved, calm will finally settle in. This belief is deeply rooted. From a young age, we are taught that questions lead to solutions, and solutions lead to relief. So the mind keeps working, assuming peace is waiting at the end of thinking. But this assumption quietly misses something essential. Peace does not come after questioning. It exists before questioning begins. Notice what happens in the brief moments when no question is active. These moments are easy to miss because they are simple. You are drinking water. You are breathing without noticing it. You are listening to a sound without naming it. In these moments, there is no problem to solve. There is no demand placed on the experience. Peace is present, not as a feeling you create, but as the natural state of not interfering. The mind does not like this simplicity. It quickly steps in and asks, "What was that?" or "How do I keep this?" The moment a question appears, peace seems to disappear. But it did not leave. Attention shifted. The question did not remove peace, it covered it. Peace, as an unasked question, means understanding that peace is not something produced by the mind. It is what remains when the mind pauses its search. This is difficult to accept because it challenges the habit of effort. We are used to earning things. We work for results. We strive for improvement. Peace feels like it should follow the same rule, but peace follows a different logic. It does not respond to effort, it responds to allowance. Questioning is not wrong. It becomes problematic when it becomes constant. When the mind turns every experience into a question, it never rests long enough to notice what is already stable beneath the movement. Questions create motion. Peace is stillness. Not frozen stillness, but quiet openness. When motion dominates every moment, stillness is overlooked. There is also an emotional layer to this. Many people believe they cannot be at peace until they understand their pain. They feel that if they can just explain their sadness, their fear, or their past, then peace will be justified. But pain does not require explanation to soften. Often, it requires presence without interrogation. When pain is met without a question, it changes texture. It is felt more directly, but it also passes more freely. The habit of questioning can be a form of protection. If you are always asking why, you stay slightly removed from what is happening. You stay in the head, where things feel manageable. Letting go of questions can feel risky because it means meeting life without armor. It means allowing experiences to touch you without filters. This vulnerability can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is also where peace becomes possible. Peace existing before questioning means that peace is not dependent on conditions. It does not need things to be resolved. It does not wait for certainty. It does not require emotional comfort. It is present even in confusion, even in sadness, even in not knowing. What blocks it is not the situation itself, but the belief that the situation must be understood before peace is allowed. This belief creates a constant delay. I'll be at peace once I know. I'll relax once this makes sense. Life keeps moving, but peace is postponed. Over time, this creates exhaustion. The mind is always working toward a future moment of relief that never fully arrives. Meanwhile, peace is quietly present in the background, ignored because it does not announce itself with answers. The Buddhist view does not treat peace as a solution. It treats peace as the natural state when grasping stops. Grasping does not only mean wanting things, it also means wanting clarity, wanting meaning, wanting mental closure. These wants are subtle, but they keep the mind busy. When they loosen, peace does not need to be created. It reveals itself. This does not mean the mind becomes empty. Thoughts still appear. Questions still arise. The difference is that they are no longer believed to be necessary for peace. They are seen as movements within awareness, not as commands that must be followed. A question can appear, and peace can remain. The question no longer dominates the space. This shift changes the relationship with thinking. Thinking becomes a tool instead of a master. You use it when needed, and you set it down when it is not. Peace is no longer held hostage by the mind's activity. It is recognized as something deeper and more stable than thought. There is also a sense of trust that develops here. Trust not in specific outcomes, but in life itself. When you stop demanding answers, you stop treating life as something that must prove itself. You stop waiting for explanations to feel safe. This trust is not blind. It is felt in the body as relaxation. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the nervous system stops bracing. Peace as an unasked question also changes how you relate to time. Questions are usually about the past or the future. Why did this happen? What will happen next? Peace lives in neither. It lives in what is happening now, before it is turned into a story. When questioning quiets, attention returns to the present. Not as an idea, but as a direct experience. This presence does not feel dramatic. That is why it is often overlooked. It feels ordinary, simple, almost too simple to be valuable. The mind wants something more impressive, something it can point to and say, "This is it." Peace does not need to be pointed at. It is what allows pointing to happen. There is a subtle freedom in realizing that peace does not depend on understanding. You no longer have to solve your life to be at ease. You no longer have to explain yourself to yourself. You no longer have to justify your feelings. This freedom does not make life easier in every way, but it makes it lighter. There is less inner resistance. This also changes how challenges are met. Difficult moments still arise. Pain still happens. But there is less internal argument, less mental noise saying, "This shouldn't be happening," or "I need to understand this right now." Without that noise, the experience, even if uncomfortable, is simpler. It has fewer layers. It moves through more cleanly. Peace as an unasked question does not mean avoiding reflection. It means knowing when reflection is helpful and when it is harmful. Reflection after the fact can bring insight. Reflection during the moment often pulls you out of it. Learning this difference is part of maturity. It is learning to sense when the mind is curious and when it is restless. Over time, this way of relating to peace changes identity itself. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must constantly figure things out. You stop measuring your worth by how well you understand your life. You become more comfortable with mystery, not as something romantic, but as something normal. Life becomes less of a problem and more of a process. This does not lead to passivity. Action still happens. Decisions are still made, but they arise from clarity that is felt, not forced. There is less second-guessing, less overthinking. Actions feel more aligned because they come from presence instead of pressure. When peace is no longer treated as an answer, the search for it relaxes. And when the search relaxes, peace becomes obvious. It was never hidden. It was simply overlooked in the noise of questioning. This recognition does not arrive as a dramatic moment. It arrives quietly, often unnoticed, like realizing you have been breathing freely after letting go of tension you did not know you were holding. As this understanding deepens, another shift begins to form. If peace does not come from answers, then what keeps the mind so attached to explaining everything? What is it protecting? What is it trying to preserve? Looking into this leads naturally into the next layer of understanding, where the role of identity and the ego's need for explanation begin to reveal themselves. As peace becomes familiar without answers, another pattern quietly steps into view. Beneath the constant questioning, beneath the habit of explanation, there is something older and more personal at work. The mind is not only asking questions out of curiosity, it is protecting something. It is holding together a story it is afraid to lose. There is a subtle discomfort that arises when explanations fall away. It feels like standing without a name, without a role, without a clear sense of who you are in this moment. This discomfort is not accidental. The ego depends on explanations to survive, not because explanations bring truth, but because they maintain continuity. They keep the sense of me intact from one moment to the next. The ego is not an enemy. It is a function. It organizes experience into a story that feels familiar. It says, "This is who I am. This is what happened to me. This is why I feel this way." These explanations form a thread that connects past, present, and future. Without them, identity feels unstable. The mind reacts to this instability by demanding reasons. Notice how quickly explanations appear when something unexpected happens. A sudden emotion arises, and the mind rushes to explain it. A change occurs, and the mind searches for a cause. This reaction is automatic. It is not guided by wisdom. It is guided by fear of fragmentation. The ego needs everything to fit into a narrative so it can say, "I am still here. I still make sense." This is why the mind often prefers familiar explanations over true insight. Familiar explanations reinforce identity. True insight sometimes dissolves it. When something is deeply seen, old stories lose their grip. The ego senses this threat and responds by creating more explanations, not fewer. It talks more. It analyzes more. It fills silence with commentary. Explanation becomes addictive because it gives a sense of control. When you can explain something, you feel positioned above it. You feel like the observer, the knower. This position strengthens identity. It creates distance between me and what is happening. The ego prefers distance because closeness threatens its structure. Direct experience has no center, stories do. The need for reasons often disguises itself as self-improvement. The mind says it wants to grow, to heal, to understand. But beneath this intention is often a deeper motive, to maintain a consistent self-image. I am the kind of person who knows why things happen. I am someone who understands myself. These identities feel safe. Letting go of explanation feels like losing ground. This is especially clear when life challenges identity. When something happens that does not fit the story you have about yourself, the mind becomes frantic. It demands reasons urgently. Why did this happen to me? What does this say about who I am? The explanation becomes a way to repair the story, to make the event fit the character you believe yourself to be. But life does not follow personal narratives. Events unfold independently of identity. When the ego tries to force meaning onto them, suffering increases. The event itself may be painful, but the struggle to explain it often adds a second layer of pain. The mind resists the idea that something can happen without fitting into a clear story. The addiction to explanation also shapes memory. The ego does not remember events as they were. It remembers them as they support identity. Certain details are highlighted, others are ignored. Over time, memory becomes a tool for self-definition rather than truth. Explanations reinforce this selective remembering. They keep the narrative consistent, even if it is incomplete. This is why explanations feel comforting. They give the illusion of stability. They say, I know where I stand, but this stability is fragile. It requires constant maintenance. Each new experience must be explained and integrated. Each contradiction must be smoothed over. The ego is always working, even when it claims to be searching for peace. When explanations are not available, anxiety often appears. This anxiety is not always about the situation itself. It is about the threat to identity. Without reasons, the ego feels exposed. It does not know how to place itself. It does not know what role to play. This vulnerability feels unsafe, so the mind reacts by searching harder. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable. Silence leaves no space for narrative. It removes the familiar reference points. In silence, there is experience without explanation. There is awareness without a center. The ego interprets this as danger. It tries to reassert itself through thought. Understanding this mechanism changes how you relate to your mind. You stop assuming that every question is wise. You begin to see that many questions are defensive. They are attempts to protect identity rather than discover truth. This recognition does not require judgment. It only requires honesty. When you see the ego's addiction to explanation, you also see why peace feels threatening at first. Peace does not confirm identity. It does not say who you are. It does not support a narrative. It simply allows experience to be as it is. To the ego, this feels like disappearance. To awareness, it feels like freedom. The ego fears moments where there is no clear story. These moments reveal that identity is constructed, not fixed. When explanations fall away, what remains is presence without definition. This presence does not belong to anyone. It is not personal. The ego resists this because it cannot claim it. This resistance shows up in subtle ways. You may notice the urge to describe your experience instead of feeling it. You may notice the urge to label emotions quickly. You may notice discomfort when things feel undefined. These are signs of the ego trying to regain narrative control. The addiction to explanation also affects how we listen to others. Instead of truly hearing, The mind prepares interpretations. It categorizes, judges, and explains. This creates distance. Real listening threatens the ego because it requires openness. It requires not knowing where the conversation will go. Explanation provides safety. Listening requires trust. When explanation loosens, there is more space for direct connection. You respond instead of reacting. You meet people as they are, not as characters in your story. This is not something the ego seeks because it cannot control it, but it is something awareness allows naturally. Letting go of the need for explanation does not mean losing yourself. It means discovering that what you are is not limited to a story. Identity becomes lighter. It is no longer something you have to defend. You can use it when needed and set it aside when it is not. This shift takes time. The ego does not dissolve all at once. It loosens gradually, through moments of noticing. Each time you allow an experience without explanation, the grip weakens slightly. Each time you rest in not knowing, the need for narrative loses some of its urgency. As this happens, peace deepens, not as an emotion, but as a background stability. You begin to sense that peace does not depend on who you think you are. It does not depend on maintaining a story. It is present even when identity feels unclear. This realization prepares the ground for something even quieter. When the ego's voice softens, when explanations are no longer constantly demanded, another form of intelligence begins to be felt. It does not speak in reasons or narratives. It does not organize life into stories. It operates beneath thought, guiding without words. This silent intelligence does not explain. It simply knows. And it is here that the next layer of peace begins to unfold. As the need to explain begins to loosen, something unfamiliar yet deeply natural comes forward. When the mind stops filling every gap with words, there is a pause that feels both exposed and steady. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. Yet it carries a quiet authority. This is where silence stops being absence and starts revealing itself as something alive. Silence is often misunderstood because we confuse it with nothingness. We assume that when there are no thoughts, no explanations, no inner commentary, there is a lack. But what actually appears is not empty. It is full in a different way. It holds awareness without direction, knowing without language. This kind of silence is not created by effort. It is uncovered when effort relaxes. After seeing how the ego clings to explanations to preserve identity, silence can feel threatening. The mind worries that without words, something important will be lost. But what is lost is not intelligence. What is lost is noise. What remains is a deeper form of understanding that does not depend on concepts. Silence as a higher intelligence means recognizing that thinking is not the only way of knowing. Long before words formed, before stories shaped identity, there was awareness responding directly to life. You still use this intelligence every day. When you pull your hand away from heat without thinking, when you sense someone's mood without explanation, when you know something feels right or wrong before reasons appear. These moments do not come from thought. They arise from silence. This intelligence does not operate through analysis. It operates through presence. It reads patterns without labeling them. It responds without planning. Because it does not rely on language, it is often overlooked. The mind values what it can describe. Silence cannot be described without losing its essence, so it is ignored or feared. Fear of silence comes from the belief that without thought, there is no guidance. But silence is not the absence of direction. It is the absence of interference. When interference drops, perception becomes clearer. You notice more. You react less. Decisions begin to arise from clarity instead of pressure. This does not mean thoughts disappear forever. Thoughts still come and go. The difference is that silence becomes the background rather than thought. Instead of being pulled into every idea, You rest in the space where ideas appear. From this space, thoughts are seen as tools, not truths. Silence also has a regulating effect on the body. When mental noise slows, the nervous system shifts out of constant alert. The body senses safety not because everything is explained, but because nothing is being forced. This sense of safety allows deeper awareness to function. It allows intuition, sensitivity, and responsiveness to surface naturally. In silence, experience is met directly. A sound is heard without being named. A feeling is felt without being analyzed. This directness carries information that words often distort. When you label an experience too quickly, you reduce it. You compress it into a concept that can be managed. Silence allows experience to remain whole. This wholeness is why silence feels intelligent. It does not break life into pieces. It sees patterns as they are. It does not rush to conclusions. It does not need to be right. It does not defend itself. It simply knows how to stay with what is happening. Many people try to reach silence by stopping thoughts forcefully. This creates tension. Silence is not something you achieve by control. It appears when resistance softens. When you stop arguing with the mind. When you allow thoughts to rise and fall without chasing them. Silence is not the opposite of thought. It is the space that holds thought. As this space becomes familiar, trust begins to develop. You realize that you do not need to think your way through every moment. You begin to feel when action is needed and when stillness is appropriate. This feeling is subtle but reliable. It is not loud like anxiety, it is calm and grounded. Silence also changes how you relate to uncertainty. Uncertainty feels threatening when the mind believes it must have answers to function. In silence, uncertainty is simply another movement within awareness. It does not need to be resolved. It does not block peace. It becomes part of the landscape. This is why silence is often present in moments of awe. When something overwhelms the mind's ability to explain, thought stops briefly. In that pause, there is a sense of clarity without words, a sense of being connected without understanding how. This is silence revealing its intelligence. Silence does not mean withdrawal from life. It allows deeper engagement. When you are not lost in internal commentary, you are more available. You listen better. You respond more accurately. You notice subtleties that were previously missed. Silence sharpens perception. This intelligence also guides ethical action. Without overthinking, you sense when something is aligned or misaligned. This sensing is immediate. It does not require moral arguments. It arises from attunement to the situation. When silence is present, action tends to be simpler and more appropriate. Silence also softens emotional pain. When emotions are met without words, they move through the body more freely. Naming and analyzing emotions can sometimes trap them. Silence allows them to express themselves fully without being turned into problems. There is also humility in silence. Silence does not claim to know everything. It does not compete. It does not seek validation. This humility creates openness. You become more receptive to learning, not through accumulation of knowledge, but through sensitivity. As silence becomes familiar, you may notice a change in how you relate to your inner voice. The voice loses its authority. It becomes one perspective among many. Silence does not silence the voice. It contextualizes it. You no longer confuse commentary with truth. This shift can feel destabilizing at first. The mind is used to being in charge. Letting silence lead feels unfamiliar. But over time, it becomes clear that silence is not passive. It is deeply responsive. It does not hesitate unnecessarily. It does not rush impulsively. It waits without waiting. Silence also reveals the difference between thinking and awareness. Thinking is something that happens. Awareness is what notices thinking. Silence aligns you with awareness rather than with content. This alignment creates stability that is not dependent on circumstances. This stability is not rigid, it is flexible. It adapts without losing itself. Silence can hold joy and sorrow without clinging or resistance. It allows emotions to be felt fully without being exaggerated by story. When silence is recognized as intelligent, the relationship with life changes. Life is no longer something you must constantly interpret. It becomes something you participate in directly. There is less mental distance, less hesitation. This does not mean you stop learning. It means learning happens in a different way. Instead of accumulating concepts, you develop sensitivity. You become attuned to nuance. You read situations holistically rather than analytically. Silence also reveals how much unnecessary thinking has been filling space. When this thinking quiets, there is relief. Not because problems are solved, but because pressure is gone. The mind rests. The body follows. This rest is not dull. It is alert. It is awake without strain. Silence does not dull perception. It sharpens it. Colors feel richer. Sounds feel clearer. Sensations feel more immediate. Over time, silence becomes a reference point. When noise returns, you recognize it. When urgency arises, you sense it. Silence becomes the ground you return to, not by effort, but by remembering that it is already here. This remembering does not require practice in the usual sense. It requires noticing what is present when you stop interfering. Silence is not built, it is revealed. As this higher intelligence becomes more familiar, another insight naturally arises. If silence holds such clarity, if it can guide without explanation, then perhaps the moment itself does not need to justify itself at all. Perhaps suffering comes not from what happens, but from treating life as something that must explain itself to you. And from this realization, the next layer of understanding begins to unfold. As silence settles and begins to guide without words, another assumption quietly comes into focus. It is so familiar that it often goes unnoticed. Beneath the need for answers, beneath the habit of explanation, there is a deeper expectation shaping how we meet life. It is the belief that every moment should mean something to us. When this belief loosens, a heavy burden begins to fall away. There is an unspoken contract many people live by. It says that life should make sense, that experiences should justify themselves, and that pain should arrive with a clear reason. When this contract is broken, frustration appears. When meaning is not immediately available, discomfort grows. The moment is judged as incomplete or unfair. This judgment is subtle, but it quietly turns life into a courtroom where every experience is expected to explain itself. This expectation is learned early. We are taught to ask what things are for. We are taught to seek purpose in every outcome. Over time, this becomes automatic. When something happens, the mind immediately looks for meaning. If it finds one, relief follows briefly. If it does not, tension arises. The suffering does not come from the event itself. It comes from the belief that the event has failed to deliver something it owes us. The idea that the moment owes us meaning places the self at the center of reality. Life is measured by how well it fits personal understanding. When it fits, we feel safe. When it does not, we feel threatened. This way of relating to life creates constant pressure. Each moment must pass an internal test. Each experience must prove its value. This pressure is exhausting. It turns living into evaluation. Instead of meeting what is happening, the mind stands back and judges whether it should be happening at all. Joy is questioned. Pain is resisted. Neutral moments are dismissed as pointless. Very little is allowed to simply be. When meaning is demanded, experience is reduced. The richness of the moment is filtered through usefulness. If something does not contribute to a story of growth, progress, or purpose, it is labeled as wasted or wrong. This labeling narrows awareness. Life becomes smaller. There is also fear beneath this demand. If moments do not carry meaning, The ego worries that life itself may be meaningless. This fear drives the search for purpose. But meaning imposed by fear does not bring peace. It creates dependency. The mind becomes addicted to interpretation, constantly scanning for reassurance. Life, however, does not operate according to personal expectations. It unfolds according to conditions, causes, and movements far beyond individual narratives. When we insist that life justify itself to us, we resist this reality. Resistance creates friction. Friction is felt as suffering. This suffering is often misunderstood. People believe they suffer because life is difficult. But many difficulties pass without leaving deep scars. What lingers is the inner struggle against what happened. The belief that this should not be happening or this must mean something adds weight. The moment becomes heavier than it needs to be. When the belief that the moment owes meaning begins to dissolve, something opens. Experiences are allowed to stand on their own. A moment can be pleasant without being important. A moment can be painful without being meaningful. This does not make life empty. It makes it honest. Honesty with life means allowing events to be what they are, not what they should be. This allowance does not remove pain, but it removes the added layer of mental struggle. The body feels what it feels. The mind does not demand justification. There is simplicity. This simplicity can feel unsettling at first. Without meaning to lean on, the mind feels exposed. It asks, if this means nothing, then what am I doing? But this question itself comes from the old contract. It assumes that value must be assigned to exist. In reality, existence does not require permission. Moments are complete as they are. They do not need to lead somewhere else to be valid. When this is seen, presence deepens. Attention rests more fully in what is happening rather than rushing ahead to interpret it. This shift changes how suffering is experienced. Pain is still pain, but it is no longer treated as a message that must be decoded. Sometimes pain is just pain. The body responds. The heart responds. The mind does not need to build a story around it. This does not mean ignoring reflection. Reflection has its place, but when reflection becomes a demand placed on the moment itself, it disrupts presence. Meaning often arises later, naturally, without force. When it is demanded too early, it distorts experience. There is freedom in realizing that not every experience needs to teach you something. Life is not a classroom in every moment. Sometimes it is just weather. Sometimes it is just movement. Treating every moment as a lesson creates tension. Allowing moments to pass without purpose creates ease. This ease does not lead to apathy. It leads to engagement without pressure. You act when action is needed. You rest when rest is needed. You do not need a reason to be alive in this moment. You already are. When the moment is no longer asked to justify itself, gratitude changes. Gratitude is no longer about finding meaning. It becomes appreciation without reason. You appreciate because something is here, not because it fits a story. This also changes how loss is held. Loss does not need to mean something good or bad about you. It does not need to be reframed immediately. It can be honored as loss. When meaning is not forced, grief moves more naturally. It does not get trapped in explanation. The idea that life must make sense to be bearable is deeply ingrained. Letting go of it feels like stepping into unknown territory, but in that territory, there is less resistance, less argument with reality. The moment is met more directly. This direct meeting brings a quiet relief. The mind no longer has to defend itself against life. It no longer has to prove that things are okay or not okay. They simply are. When life is allowed to be without justification, peace becomes more stable. It does not depend on interpretation. It does not collapse when meaning is unclear. It remains even when answers do not come. This reframing also softens judgment. When you stop demanding meaning from your own experiences, you stop demanding it from others. You become more patient, more open, less reactive. The moment not owing you meaning does not make life smaller, it makes it wider. There is room for mystery, room for contradiction, room for experiences that cannot be explained. As this understanding settles, another subtle habit becomes visible. Even when we stop demanding meaning, there can still be a quiet waiting inside us. A waiting for outcomes, for insight, for something to arrive later. Seeing this waiting clearly opens the door to the next layer of peace, where presence no longer bargains with the future at all. As the demand for meaning falls away, a quieter habit reveals itself. Even when the moment is allowed to be as it is, there can still be a subtle leaning forward inside, a sense of waiting, not obvious, not loud, just a gentle tension that says, something should come from this. When this tension is seen clearly, a deeper level of peace becomes possible. There is a difference between being present and waiting. On the surface, they can look the same. You may be sitting quietly, breathing, doing nothing, but inside, something is leaning ahead. The mind is patient on the outside, yet secretly bargaining on the inside. It waits for clarity, for relief, for insight, for change. This kind of waiting keeps one foot in the future. Presence becomes conditional. Waiting without expectation is not passive. It is not dull. It is alert without reaching. It is staying with what is here without asking it to turn into something else. This is a subtle art because the habit of expectation is deeply ingrained. The mind is trained to expect results. When it does not expect results, it often feels lost. Expectation often hides behind good intentions. You may sit quietly hoping for peace. You may observe your breath, hoping for calm. You may listen to teachings, hoping for understanding. These hopes seem harmless, but they shape the experience. They turn presence into a means to an end. The moment becomes a tool instead of a living reality. When presence is used as a tool, disappointment is never far away. If nothing happens, frustration appears. If something happens, attachment forms. Either way, peace remains unstable. It depends on outcomes. Waiting without expectation removes this instability. It allows the moment to be complete without needing to produce anything. This does not mean nothing happens. It means whatever happens is not demanded. There is a quiet strength in this kind of waiting. It does not collapse into impatience. It does not push forward, it rests. This resting is not sleep. It is awareness without agenda. The Buddhist tradition often speaks of patience, but this patience is not endurance. It is not tolerating the present until something better arrives. It is intimacy with what is here. It is staying close to experience without trying to improve it. Expectation creates distance. When you expect something, you step back slightly. You observe from the position of not yet. Waiting without expectation removes that distance. You are fully here because there is nowhere else you need to be. This changes how time is felt. When expectation is present, time feels heavy. Each moment is measured against what should come next. When expectation drops, time loosens. Moments are not stepping stones, they stand on their own. There is also honesty in waiting without expectation. You stop pretending that you know what should happen. You stop acting as if life must follow a plan. This honesty is calming. It removes the need to manage reality. Many people confuse expectation with motivation. They fear that without expecting results, nothing will move. But movement does not come from expectation. It comes from clarity. When clarity is present, action happens naturally. When expectation dominates, action becomes strained. Waiting without expectation also softens self-judgment. When you expect insight or progress, you measure yourself. Am I doing this right? Why am I not calmer? These questions add pressure. Without expectation, there is nothing to measure. There is only experience. This allows learning to happen differently. Insight arises not because it was demanded, but because conditions were right. Like a fruit ripening on its own, understanding appears when forced effort stops interfering. This way of waiting is deeply respectful. It respects the rhythm of life. It acknowledges that not everything unfolds on command. It trusts timing without trying to control it. Trust is central here. Trust not in a specific outcome, but in the unfolding itself. This trust is not blind belief. It is felt in the body as ease. The muscles soften, the breath steadies, the nervous system stops scanning for results. When expectation drops, attention becomes more sensitive. You notice small details, the texture of sound, the movement of breath, the subtle shifts in feeling. These details were always present, but expectation filtered them out. Expectation also creates subtle disappointment, even when things go well. If you expect calm and feel calm, the mind quickly wants more. If you expect insight and receive insight, the mind wants to keep it. Waiting without expectation prevents this cycle. Experiences come and go without being owned. This does not mean becoming indifferent. Care still exists. Interest still exists. The difference is that care is not tied to outcome. You engage fully, but you do not cling. Waiting without expectation also changes how difficulty is held. When something unpleasant happens, expectation often says, "This should end soon." When it does not, resistance grows. Without expectation, the unpleasantness is met directly. It may still be uncomfortable, but it is simpler. There is less inner struggle. This simplicity allows resilience. You are less shaken by change because you were not waiting for stability. You were present with movement itself. Change becomes less threatening. This art also reveals how often expectation disguises itself as hope. Hope can be nourishing, but it can also delay presence. When hope leans too far into the future, the present becomes a waiting room. Waiting without expectation brings life back into the room you are already in. There is also humility here. Waiting without expectation accepts that you do not know what is best in every moment. It allows life to surprise you. Surprise is not possible when outcomes are already decided in the mind. This openness invites creativity. Without expectation, responses are fresh. You are not repeating patterns. You are meeting situations as they arise. This freshness feels alive. Over time, waiting without expectation becomes natural. You stop needing to remind yourself. The body learns that it is safe to be here without guarantees. This learning is deep. It changes how stress is experienced. Urgency loses its grip. This does not mean that goals disappear. Goals exist, but they no longer dominate the present. You can plan without living inside the plan. You can move forward without abandoning now. The most subtle shift is that peace stops being something you wait for. It becomes something you notice. It was present even while waiting, but expectation hid it. When expectation fades, peace is not dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and unremarkable. That is why it is real. It does not depend on special states or insights. As this way of waiting settles, another habit becomes visible. Even without expectation, the mind may still try to explain what is happening. It may still ask why. Seeing how this question pulls you away from direct experience opens the next layer of understanding, where the very act of asking why is gently examined. As waiting becomes cleaner and less tied to outcomes, the mind often tries one last move to stay in charge. It does not always demand results anymore, but it still wants a handle. It still wants a lever it can pull. And the lever it reaches for most is a single word that sounds innocent, but has real power. Why? There is a special kind of ache that why carries. It can feel like a cry, like a plea, like a hidden protest. It can sound calm, but inside it often holds urgency. It says, "Explain this to me so I can finally relax." It says, "Tell me the reason so I can feel safe again." And the moment you ask it in that way, you step out of direct life and into the world of mental distance. Why is this happening? Feels like a question that should bring clarity. But most of the time, it does the opposite. It moves you away from what is real and places you into a search for mental comfort. And mental comfort is not the same as truth. Mental comfort is what the mind accepts. Reality is what is here, whether the mind accepts it or not. The question why is not always harmful. Sometimes it helps you solve a practical problem. If a machine stops working, why is useful? If you need to improve a system, why is useful? But when why is asked toward life itself, toward emotions, toward pain, toward uncertainty, it often becomes a form of resistance. It becomes a way to avoid feeling what is happening. You can notice this immediately in your body. Something uncomfortable arises, a tightness in the chest, a wave of sadness, a sense of fear. And instead of staying with the raw feeling, the mind quickly says, "Why am I feeling this?" In that moment, attention leaves the sensation and jumps into thought. The feeling is no longer met. It is investigated. The mind moves from contact to commentary. This shift seems small, but it changes everything. Direct experience is simple. It is sensation, emotion, sound, breath, movement. It does not need a story to be real. Commentary is complex. It pulls in memory, imagination, comparison, blame, and prediction. It creates a whole world on top of the moment. And this new world often feels more urgent than the moment itself. That is how you get trapped. When why becomes a habit, it turns life into a puzzle that must be solved before it can be lived. But life is not waiting for your solution. It is already happening. The sun is already setting. Your breath is already moving. People are already speaking. Your heart is already responding. When why takes over, you miss what is actually there. The mind believes that understanding will bring relief. So it asks why, as if it is opening a door, but many times it is closing one. It closes the door to contact because contact requires staying close to discomfort without turning away into explanations. This is where why becomes a kind of avoidance that looks intelligent. It can feel mature to analyze yourself. It can feel wise to search for causes. But if the searching keeps you from feeling and living, it is not wisdom. It is fear dressed in clean language. There is another hidden problem with why. It often assumes that there is a single clear reason behind complex experiences. But human life is not built from single causes. Your mood might be shaped by sleep, hormones, memories, stress, food, weather, social tension, expectations, and countless small signals in the body. When you ask why in a desperate way, you are asking for a simple answer to a complex reality. The mind may give you one, but it will likely be incomplete. And then you will build decisions and emotions on top of a weak story. This is how why becomes a trap. It creates false certainty. The mind finds an explanation that feels right and then clings to it. I feel this because they don't respect me. This happened because I failed. I'm stuck because I'm broken. These stories can feel like clarity, but they often narrow your view. They reduce life into a label. And once a label is believed, you stop seeing new information that doesn't fit it. Why also tends to pull you into the past. It asks for causes, and causes live behind you. So even while your body is here, your attention is walking backward, scanning old scenes, old words, old mistakes. This can be useful for learning, but it can also become endless. The past has no bottom. You can always find another memory, another influence, another reason. Meanwhile, the present is left unattended. Sometimes why pulls you into the future instead. Why is this happening to prepare me for something? Now you are not only backward looking, you are guessing forward. You start living in a fantasy of purpose, trying to predict what life is doing. This can become another form of control. It can make you feel special for suffering, or it can make you anxious about what's coming. Either way, it is not direct experience. It is mental construction. Direct experience has a different flavor. It is not built from reasons. It is built from contact. It asks, what is here? Not, why is this here? What is here? Keeps you in the moment. It opens sensation. It allows you to feel clearly. It does not demand a story. It invites presence. What is here can be answered honestly without analysis. Tightness, heat, pressure, trembling, numbness, sadness, a need for rest, a desire to be held. This kind of noticing is grounding. It brings you back to the truth that is already available. Why can also create separation from other people. When someone hurts you, why can become a weapon. Why would they do this? The mind starts building a case. It assumes motives. It creates villains. It tries to protect identity. Sometimes the other person truly acted badly and boundaries are needed. But the question why often keeps you stuck in mental replay instead of moving toward what is needed now. Clear communication, distance, healing, or letting go. Even when why is directed inward, it can become self-attack. Why am I like this? Why can't I be normal? Why do I always ruin things? These are not real questions. They are disguised judgments. They keep you in shame. They make you feel like a broken object that must be fixed before it can belong. The mind loves why because it gives a sense of power. If you know the reason, you believe you can control the outcome. But life does not always follow known reasons. Many things happen without personal permission, and when why is used to regain power, it often increases suffering because it sets an impossible task to mentally conquer reality. In Buddhist practice, suffering is often linked to craving and clinging. The demand behind why is a form of clinging. It clings to the idea that life must be understandable on demand. It clings to the idea that pain must justify itself. It clings to the belief that the mind must be able to stand above experience and explain it. But experience is not below the mind. The mind is part of experience. Thoughts are events too. Why is not a neutral tool in these moments. It is an event arising in the mind, often fueled by discomfort. When you see it as an event, you stop obeying it automatically. This is not about banning the question. It is about seeing the cost. The cost is direct contact. The cost is presence. The cost is peace that could be here, even in difficulty. There is also a deeper point. The mind often asks why because it cannot accept because, not because the explanation is lacking, but because acceptance is lacking. Sometimes the most honest answer to why is this happening is simply because conditions came together, because people are complex, because bodies change, because choices have consequences, because life is moving. The ego hates this answer because it offers no special meaning. It does not flatter the self. It does not protect the story. When the mind cannot accept because, it keeps asking why, like a child refusing to sleep. It thinks the next answer will finally satisfy. But satisfaction does not come from better reasons. It comes from ending the fight with the moment. Direct experience does not require acceptance in the emotional sense. You do not have to like what is happening. You do not have to agree with it. But you can stop demanding that it explain itself before you let it be real. This is where freedom starts. A powerful way to see this is to notice the split why creates. Without why, there is an event and awareness of the event. With why, there is an event, awareness, and a judge standing outside asking for justification. That judge is the ego in a polite outfit. The judge believes it must approve reality before reality can be allowed. This is the root of the distance. When you drop why, the judge relaxes. You return to a simpler relationship with life. You feel what is there. You see what is there. You hear what is there. You respond. This response is important. People fear that if they stop asking why, they will become passive. But dropping why does not remove action. It removes delay and confusion. When you are fully present, you often act more wisely because you are not acting from panic. You are acting from clarity of contact. For example, if you feel anxious and ask why, you might spiral into theories and blame. You might dig into childhood, relationships, future fears. This can create more anxiety. If you feel anxious and ask what, you notice the body, tight stomach, fast breathing, restless energy. From that, you can respond skillfully. Slow the breath, move the body, drink water, rest, speak to someone, reduce stimulation. The anxiety is met directly. It is not turned into a philosophical puzzle. This approach is not shallow. It is deeply intelligent. It respects the fact that many experiences are first felt as body signals, not as ideas. The body speaks in sensations, not in reasons. Why often ignores this language. What listens to it. You can also see how why blocks beauty. If you are watching the sky and suddenly feel a quiet joy, why can ruin it. Why do I feel this? Then the mind starts measuring, comparing, trying to keep it. The joy becomes a project, and the project replaces joy. Direct experience is lost again. The same happens in meditation and spiritual practice. Many people sit down hoping to feel peace. When they feel restlessness, they ask, "Why can't I calm down?" This question adds pressure. The mind now has a problem to solve. Meditation becomes a performance. The practice becomes another way to prove something. Peace moves further away. Waiting without expectation prepared you for this. It showed you how to be present without bargaining for results. Now you see how why is often the bargaining voice returning through a side door. It says, "If I understand, I will be okay." But being okay does not require understanding. It requires presence. There is also the issue of timing. Sometimes insight really does arise from questioning, but it arises when the mind is calm, not when it is desperate. When why is asked from panic, it is not seeking truth. It is seeking escape. When why is asked from stillness, it can be thoughtful, patient, open. The same word, different energy. So the key is not the word. The key is the relationship behind it. Is the question trying to control the moment, or is it exploring gently? Most why questions in suffering are not gentle. They are tight. They are urgent. They are attempts to wrestle reality into something manageable. To move toward direct experience, you learn a simple skill. Notice the urge to ask, why, then pause. Feel what is underneath it. Often you will find fear, discomfort, a need for certainty, or a wish to be reassured. When you meet that underlying feeling directly, the question loses its grip. You can also replace why with more grounded questions that keep you close to reality. What is happening in my body right now? What do I need in this moment? What is the next kind step? What is within my control? These questions do not demand the universe to justify itself. They support direct contact and wise response. This does not mean you stop learning from your life. It means you stop demanding that learning happen instantly in the middle of pain. Learning can come later. Healing can unfold without being forced. In fact, it often unfolds better when it is not forced. When why no longer blocks direct experience, you begin to notice something strange and beautiful. Reality feels closer, not always comfortable, but closer. You stop living at a distance from your own life. You stop watching yourself from the outside. You come back into the room. And once you are back in the room, another deeper shift becomes possible. Because if why has been a way to hold life at a distance, then what happens when the old stories that why tries to protect start to collapse? What happens when narrative breaks and you are still okay? That is where the next layer of peace begins to open, not as a concept, but as liberation. When the question why finally loosens its grip, something unexpected happens. the mind does not immediately replace it with a better answer. Instead, there is a gap. In that gap, the familiar story about who you are and what your life means starts to feel less solid. This can feel unsettling at first, but it is also where a deeper freedom quietly begins. There is a moment many people experience, often during difficulty or deep reflection, when the story they have been telling themselves stops working. The explanations no longer convince, the labels no longer fit. The future they were moving toward no longer feels certain. In these moments, the mind scrambles to rebuild the narrative, but sometimes it fails. And when it fails, fear often appears. Yet hidden inside this fear is an opening most people never recognize. Stories are how the mind organizes life. They connect events, give direction, and provide a sense of identity. This is who I am. This is where I'm going. This is why things happened the way they did. These stories are not wrong. They are useful, but they are not reality itself. They are maps, not the territory. When we forget this, we suffer. The collapse of narrative happens when life moves in a way the map cannot explain. A loss that does not fit the plan. A change that was never expected. An inner shift that makes old goals feel empty. In these moments, the mind can no longer maintain continuity. The past no longer explains the present. The future no longer feels reliable. The story breaks. At first, this feels like losing ground. Without a story, the mind feels exposed. It does not know how to position itself. It does not know what role to play. This is often experienced as confusion, sadness, or a sense of being lost. Many people try to escape this feeling as quickly as possible by creating a new story. But if you stay, something else becomes visible. Without a narrative, experience becomes more immediate. You are no longer filtering life through who you think you are supposed to be. You are no longer comparing the present to an imagined future. You are simply here, responding to what is happening now. This simplicity can feel strange, but it is also deeply relieving. The story of the self carries a lot of weight. It carries expectations, regrets, and responsibilities that are not always necessary in the moment. When the story collapses, this weight lifts, even if only briefly. You may notice that you are still breathing, still aware, still able to respond, even without knowing what it all means. This realization is quietly powerful. Peace after the collapse of narrative does not come from replacing one story with a better one. It comes from seeing that peace does not depend on any story at all. It comes from discovering that awareness does not disappear when identity feels unclear. In fact, awareness often feels more vivid when identity loosens. This is why moments of deep crisis can sometimes lead to profound calm after the initial shock. When the mind finally gives up trying to make sense of everything, the body relaxes. There is nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove, just the fact of being here. Narratives create time pressure. They pull attention into what was and what should be. When narrative collapses, time feels different. The present moment expands. You may notice details you usually miss. Sounds feel closer. Sensations feel clearer. Life feels more raw and direct. This rawness is not always pleasant, but it is honest. Without a story telling you how to feel, emotions are experienced more fully and then pass. They are not turned into identities. Sadness is felt as sadness, not as my sadness. Fear is felt as fear, not as my failure. This distinction reduces suffering. There is also a kind of innocence that returns when narrative falls away. You stop relating to life through old conclusions. You become curious again, not in an intellectual way, but in a direct way. You meet situations without knowing how they should go. This openness allows new responses to emerge. Many people fear losing their story because they think it will lead to emptiness or meaninglessness. But what often appears instead is a quiet sense of presence that feels more stable than any explanation. This presence does not need a reason to exist. It does not depend on success or failure. It simply is. This does not mean that stories never return. They do. The mind naturally organizes experience. The difference is that you no longer believe the story is who you are. You see it as something that arises and fades. You use it when helpful and release it when it becomes heavy. The collapse of narrative also reveals how much suffering comes from trying to live up to an image. When the image dissolves, even temporarily, there is relief. You do not have to be anything special. You do not have to make your life meaningful in a particular way. You are allowed to be unfinished. This unfinished quality is deeply human. Life is not a completed project. It is an ongoing movement. When you stop forcing it into a story with a clear arc, you move with it instead of against it. This movement feels more natural, less strained. There is also compassion that arises here. When you see how fragile stories are, you see the same fragility in others. You realize that everyone is holding together a narrative, often out of fear. This understanding softens judgment. You become more patient, more forgiving, both with yourself and with others. Peace after narrative collapse is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels like a quiet okayness, even in uncertainty. You may still not know what comes next, but the urgency to know fades. You trust that you can meet whatever comes, even without a plan. This trust is not based on confidence in outcomes. It is based on confidence in presence. You have seen that even when the story falls apart, you remain. Awareness remains. The ability to respond remains. This realization reduces fear. There is also freedom in not knowing who you are supposed to be. You can respond freshly instead of repeating patterns. You are less bound by past decisions. You are more open to change. This openness brings a sense of aliveness that stories often dull. The mind may still try to rebuild a narrative after such experiences. This is natural. But now there is a difference. You know that the story is optional. You know that peace does not depend on its success. This knowledge creates space. In this space, you may notice that life does not feel as personal as it once did. Events happen, but they are not always taken as statements about you. This reduces defensiveness. You stop interpreting everything as a reflection of your worth. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you resilient. You care, but you are not crushed when things do not align with expectations. You adapt, you move on, you stay present. Peace after narrative collapse also brings a deeper sense of humility. You see that the mind does not control life as much as it thought. This humility is not weakness, it is relief. You no longer have to carry the burden of making everything make sense. Over time, you may begin to value these moments of narrative collapse instead of fearing them. You see them as resets, opportunities to return to what is simple and real, chances to let go of stories that no longer serve. This does not mean seeking chaos or confusion. It means not clinging when clarity disappears. It means trusting that clarity is not always necessary for peace. As this trust deepens, you begin to notice another layer of experience. Beneath stories, beneath questions, beneath identity, there are sensations and emotions moving through the body. These experiences do not need to be explained or narrated. They simply want to be felt. Learning to meet them without translation opens the next doorway, where even emotional pain is no longer treated as a problem to solve, but as raw life energy waiting to move. When the story about who you are loosens and no longer defines every moment, attention naturally drops lower. It moves out of explanations and into sensation. What remains is not a concept, not an identity, but something more immediate. This is where emotional pain is finally met without language, and where something deeply misunderstood begins to reveal its true nature. There is a habit so ingrained that it feels automatic. When discomfort appears, the mind rushes to explain it. Pain is treated like a message that must be translated, decoded, and understood before it can be allowed. But emotional pain, at its core, is not a riddle. It is energy moving through the body before the mind turns it into a story. When pain is felt without translation, it does not feel personal in the same way. It feels physical, alive, dynamic. Tightness in the chest, heat in the face, a heaviness in the stomach, a pulsing, a trembling, a pressure. These sensations are not yet sadness, fear, or shame. They become those things after interpretation. Before that, they are simply experience. The moment the mind labels pain, it begins to solidify. This is grief. This is anxiety. This is trauma. Labels are useful for communication, but they also freeze what is actually fluid. Emotional energy is meant to move. When it is named too quickly, it gets held in place. The body keeps feeling it, but now the mind is involved, replaying, judging, and resisting. This resistance is what makes pain feel unbearable. Not the sensation itself, but the refusal to let it be what it is. The body says, "This is happening." The mind says, "This should not be happening." That disagreement creates tension. The pain is no longer just pain. It becomes a problem. When emotional pain is seen as untranslated experience, this struggle softens. You stop asking what it means. You stop trying to fix it immediately. You allow the body to speak in its own language. This does not make pain pleasant, but it makes it honest. Honest pain moves. Translated pain gets stuck. There is a reason why strong emotions are often felt physically. The body processes experience faster than thought. It responds to threat, loss, and change before the mind has time to explain. When the mind interrupts too soon, it takes over a process it does not fully understand. It turns a natural response into a mental burden. Many people believe that if they do not understand their pain, they will be overwhelmed by it. But the opposite is often true. When pain is allowed to be felt without interpretation, it tends to peak and pass. When it is constantly analyzed, it lingers. This does not mean suppressing thought. Thoughts will appear, memories will surface. The key difference is where attention rests. When attention stays with sensation, thoughts become background noise. When attention stays with thoughts, sensation becomes threatening. Emotional pain as raw energy also reveals something important about fear. Fear often comes from imagining pain will last forever, but sensation does not have a timeline. It changes moment to moment. When you stay with sensation, you notice this change. The intensity rises and falls. The shape shifts. The body releases when it is allowed. The mind, however, prefers stability, even painful stability. A story about pain feels safer than uncertainty. "I am broken" feels more manageable than "something is moving through me." The first gives identity. The second requires trust. Trusting raw experience is not easy. It goes against conditioning. From a young age, many people are taught to explain their feelings, to justify them, to make sense of them quickly. Why are you upset? What's wrong with you? These questions teach the mind to distance itself from feeling. Over time, this distance becomes normal. People live in their heads, carrying emotional weight in their bodies without noticing. The pain becomes background tension. Fatigue, irritability, numbness. When attention finally returns to sensation, it can feel intense because it has been ignored for so long. This intensity does not mean something is wrong. It means something is finally being felt. Emotional energy that was frozen by interpretation begins to thaw. This thawing can feel uncomfortable, but it is also healing. Seeing pain as energy rather than meaning also reduces shame. Shame often comes from believing that pain says something about who you are. If pain is just energy, it is not a verdict. It is not an identity. It is an experience passing through. This perspective also changes how compassion arises. When you feel pain without story, you feel how vulnerable the human body is. You see how quickly it responds to threat and loss. This understanding naturally extends to others. You recognize their pain as energy too, not as personal failure. Emotional pain without translation also reconnects you to instinct. The body knows how to regulate itself when it is not overridden, crying, shaking, resting, breathing deeply. These are natural responses. When the mind interferes with judgments like, "I shouldn't feel this," or "this is too much," regulation is disrupted. There is intelligence in the body that does not need explanation. It knows when to release and when to hold. It knows when to move and when to be still. But it can only do this when it is listened to. Listening to the body means slowing down enough to notice sensation, not forcing attention but allowing it. When you sit with pain, not to analyze it but to feel it, something shifts. The pain becomes less threatening. It is still there, but it is no longer an enemy. This is not a technique, it is a relationship with experience that says you are allowed to be here. That permission alone reduces suffering. Emotional pain as untranslated experience also reveals how much of suffering is created by anticipation. The mind predicts future pain and reacts now, but sensation only exists now. When you return to now, you meet what is actually happening, not what might happen. This return to now does not require courage in the heroic sense. It requires gentleness. Forcing yourself to feel pain can be another form of violence. Allowing it requires patience and kindness. Sometimes pain needs space, sometimes it needs movement, sometimes it needs rest. There is no formula. The body communicates through subtle signals. When you stop decoding and start listening, these signals become clearer. This approach also changes the relationship with healing. Healing is no longer about fixing what is broken. It is about allowing what is alive to complete its movement. Pain is not an error. It is part of life's rhythm. There is also relief in realizing that not all pain needs to be resolved. Some pain simply passes when it is no longer resisted. Some pain leaves traces, but these traces do not define you. They are marks of having lived. This does not mean ignoring deep wounds. Some experiences require support, care, and time. But even in those cases, the foundation is the same, meeting pain as experience, not as identity. As you learn to stay with pain without translating it, you may notice moments of unexpected calm within discomfort. These moments are not the absence of pain, they are the absence of struggle. They show you that peace and pain are not always opposites. They can coexist. This coexistence changes how you relate to life. You stop fearing difficult emotions. You stop rushing to escape them. You trust that you can feel and survive. This trust is empowering. Over time, emotional pain becomes less dramatic. It still hurts, but it does not dominate your inner world. It moves through like weather instead of becoming a climate. This does not make you detached. It makes you present. You feel more, not less, but you suffer less because you are not fighting what you feel. As this way of relating to pain settles, another subtle pattern begins to reveal itself. Even when pain is allowed, even when stories fall away, there can still be a quiet belief underneath it all, the belief that understanding is required for peace. Seeing how this belief hides a subtle arrogance opens the next layer of insight, where the very need to make sense of everything is gently questioned. As emotional pain is finally allowed to move without being decoded, another layer quietly comes into view. It is not loud or aggressive. It hides behind intelligence, behind curiosity, behind the desire to understand. Yet it shapes how we meet every moment. It is the assumption that reality must make sense to us before it can be accepted. There is a belief so normalized that it rarely feels like a belief at all. It feels like common sense. The belief says that if something is happening, there must be a reason we can grasp. If there is pain, confusion, or change, it must be explainable in a way that satisfies the mind. This belief places the self at the center of experience, not openly but quietly. It turns the mind into a judge, and life into something that must present its case. This is the subtle arrogance of seeking answers. Not arrogance in the loud, boastful sense, but in the assumption of authority. The assumption that reality should be understandable on demand, that experiences must align with personal logic, that the mind is entitled to clarity before it relaxes. This arrogance often goes unnoticed because it wears the mask of humility. I just want to understand. I'm trying to grow. I need clarity to move forward. These statements sound reasonable. They even sound responsible. But beneath them is an expectation that life should explain itself in terms the ego approves of. When every moment must make sense, the self becomes the reference point for reality. Events are filtered through questions like, what does this mean for me? Why is this happening to me? How does this fit into my story? Reality is no longer met directly. It is evaluated. Evaluation creates distance. The moment is no longer something you are inside of. It becomes something you stand outside of, analyzing. This stance feels powerful. It gives the illusion of control, but it also creates separation. You are no longer part of the flow. You are above it, judging it. This position is exhausting. Being the judge of reality requires constant vigilance. Every experience must be processed, categorized, and either accepted or rejected. There is no rest. Even pleasant moments are assessed. Why does this feel good? Will it last? What should I do with this? Nothing is allowed to simply happen. The belief that everything must make sense also creates impatience with life. When meaning does not appear quickly, frustration arises. The moment is labeled as wrong, confusing, or unfair. This labeling is not neutral. It carries resistance. Resistance is felt as tension in the body and agitation in the mind. This resistance is not caused by the event itself. It is caused by the belief that the event has failed. Failed to make sense. Failed to provide clarity. Failed to meet expectation. The mind reacts as if something has gone wrong, even when life is unfolding naturally. This belief also feeds comparison. When you think moments must make sense, you compare your life to others. They seem to understand. They seem to have it figured out. You assume that peace belongs to those with answers. This assumption deepens insecurity. It creates a sense of being behind, lacking, or deficient. But those who appear certain are often just more attached to their stories. Certainty does not equal peace. Often it is the opposite. Certainty can be a defense against vulnerability. Not knowing exposes the ego. Knowing protects it. The arrogance of seeking answers also shapes spirituality. Many people approach spiritual teachings as systems to explain life. They look for frameworks that promise understanding. When they do not get the clarity they expect, they feel disappointed or betrayed. They treat wisdom as another authority that should satisfy the mind. But true wisdom does not flatter the ego. It does not promise answers to everything. It often points out the limits of understanding. This can feel threatening to the part of the mind that wants to be in charge. There is also a subtle hierarchy created by this belief. Those who know are seen as above those who do not. Insight becomes status. Understanding becomes identity. I am someone who sees clearly. This identity is fragile. It must be defended. When confusion appears, the ego reacts strongly because its image is threatened. This is why people often resist admitting they do not know. Not knowing feels like failure, but in reality, not knowing is closer to truth than forced understanding. Life is vast. The mind is limited. Accepting this is not weakness. It is honesty. When the belief that everything must make sense begins to soften, humility emerges. Not humility as self-doubt, but humility as right relationship. You recognize that you are part of something larger, not the center of it. You see that reality does not exist to satisfy your need for explanation. This recognition brings relief. You no longer have to manage life. You no longer have to hold everything together mentally. You can let experiences come and go without passing judgment on their validity. This does not mean abandoning reason. Reason has its place. It helps you navigate practical matters. It helps you learn from experience. The problem arises when reason is used as a gatekeeper for peace. When peace is delayed until understanding is achieved, suffering becomes chronic. The belief that understanding is required for peace creates an endless task. There will always be something unclear. There will always be aspects of life beyond comprehension. If peace depends on clarity, peace will always be postponed. This postponement keeps the mind restless. It is always almost satisfied, always one answer away. This restlessness is often mistaken for curiosity or ambition, but it is driven by fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being lost, fear of not being in control. Seeing the arrogance in this fear is not about self-criticism. It is about clarity. It is about recognizing that the demand for sense-making is not neutral. It shapes how you live. It determines whether you meet life with openness or resistance. When you stop assuming that moments must make sense, your relationship with confusion changes. Confusion becomes a state, not a failure. It becomes something you can be with, rather than something you must escape. This ability to stay with confusion is a form of maturity. Staying with confusion does not mean staying stuck. It means not panicking. It means allowing clarity to come in its own time, or not at all. It means trusting that you can function without having everything explained. This trust shifts the center of gravity from the mind to awareness. Awareness does not need answers to be stable. It does not judge reality. It receives it. From this receiving, appropriate responses arise naturally. When awareness leads, the self no longer sits in judgment. It participates instead. It responds to what is needed without demanding justification. This participation feels lighter. There is less internal friction. The subtle arrogance of seeking answers often hides behind the idea of self-improvement. I need to understand myself better. I need to figure this out. While growth is natural, turning life into a constant project reinforces the belief that something is wrong with the present moment. The present moment does not need improvement to be real. It does not need understanding to be lived. When you see this, you stop treating life as a problem. You start treating it as a process. This process includes confusion, pain, joy, and uncertainty. None of these require explanation to exist. They arise, move, and pass. When the self stops judging them, they lose their power to disturb. This does not mean passivity. It means engagement without entitlement. You engage with life without demanding that it meet your standards of sense. You respond where you can, accept where you cannot. As this way of being settles, a deeper respect for reality develops. Reality is no longer something to conquer mentally. It is something to listen to. This listening is quiet. It does not rush to conclusions. It does not assume superiority. This respect also softens how you treat others. You stop expecting them to make sense to you all the time. You stop demanding explanations for their behavior before allowing connection. This creates space for empathy. The arrogance of seeking answers collapses when you see that life does not revolve around your understanding. This collapse is not humiliating, it is freeing. You are released from the burden of being the one who must know. In that release, peace becomes simpler. It is no longer tied to insight or clarity. It is tied to openness. You are at peace not because you understand life, but because you are no longer fighting it. This peace does not make you passive or detached. It makes you responsive without being defensive. You act from what is needed, not from what must be proven. As this humility deepens, another shift becomes possible. If the self no longer needs to judge reality, then perhaps reality can be trusted, even when you internally disagree with it. Exploring how to rest in what is, without agreement or approval, opens the next layer of peace. When the need to judge reality softens, a new tension quietly appears. It is not about understanding anymore. It is not even about meaning. It is the discomfort of being with something you do not agree with. Life may be allowed to exist, but the heart still resists it. This is where the next layer of peace asks for something deeper than acceptance. It asks for trust without approval. There is a common misunderstanding that peace requires agreement. That to be at ease, you must like what is happening, support it, or believe it should be this way. This misunderstanding keeps many people stuck. They wait for their inner resistance to disappear before they allow themselves to rest. But inner resistance can exist without blocking peace. What blocks peace is the belief that resistance must disappear first. Trusting reality without agreement means recognizing that life does not need your permission to unfold, and you do not need to approve of it to remain present. This is not a moral stance. It is not about saying something is right or wrong. It is about stopping the internal struggle that says, "I cannot be at peace until this changes." Disagreement is natural. The body reacts. The heart has preferences. The mind has values. These do not disappear on a spiritual path. They are part of being human. The problem begins when disagreement turns into refusal. When the inner voice says, "This should not be happening, therefore I cannot rest." This refusal creates a constant state of tension. Even when nothing is actively wrong, the nervous system stays alert, waiting for conditions to improve. Peace is postponed. Life is treated as a temporary problem instead of a living process. Trusting reality does not mean trusting outcomes. It does not mean believing everything will work out the way you want. It means trusting that you can remain present with whatever is happening without collapsing or hardening. It is trust in your capacity to stay, not trust in circumstances. This distinction is important. Many people resist the idea of trust because they confuse it with blind optimism. They think trust means denying pain or pretending everything is okay. But trust here means something quieter and stronger. It means allowing the moment to exist without fighting it internally. You can disagree with what is happening and still be here. You can dislike the situation and still breathe. You can want change and still meet the present moment honestly. These things are not opposites. The belief that agreement is required for peace often comes from early conditioning. Many people learned that safety depended on approval. If you approved of what was happening, you were rewarded. If you resisted, you were punished. Over time, this pattern becomes internalized. The mind believes peace is only allowed when conditions are acceptable. Breaking this pattern is not easy because it feels unsafe at first. Allowing yourself to rest in a moment you dislike feels like giving up control. The mind worries that if you stop resisting, you will become passive or weak. But resistance is not the same as action. You can act without fighting reality internally. Internal fighting drains energy. It consumes attention. It narrows perception. When you stop fighting internally, you have more clarity to respond externally. Trusting reality without agreement often leads to more effective action, not less. This trust shows up first in the body. When you stop insisting that the moment should be different before you relax, the body begins to settle. Muscles release slightly, breathing deepens. The nervous system shifts out of emergency mode. This physical settling creates mental clarity. Mental clarity does not mean liking the situation, it means seeing it clearly. Without internal resistance, you can assess what is needed. You can decide what is within your control and what is not. This discernment is often blocked by emotional struggle. Trusting reality also changes how emotions are experienced. When you allow emotions to exist without agreeing with the situation that caused them, they move more freely. Anger can be felt without becoming aggression. Sadness can be felt without becoming despair. Fear can be felt without becoming paralysis. This freedom comes from separating presence from approval. Presence says, "This is here." Approval says, "This is okay." You do not need approval to be present. Presence is enough. Many people confuse trust with surrender. They fear that trusting reality means giving up their values or boundaries. But trust does not erase discernment. It simply removes the inner war. You can say no without hatred. You can leave without bitterness. You can set boundaries without closing your heart. Trusting reality without agreement also softens the need to control others. When you stop demanding that reality makes sense to you, you stop demanding that people behave in ways that confirm your expectations. This reduces conflict. You become less reactive, more responsive. This does not mean tolerating harm. It means seeing clearly when action is needed. Without internal resistance clouding judgment, you can respond with firmness and clarity. Another aspect of this trust is learning to stay with discomfort without labeling it as intolerable. Discomfort often triggers urgency. The mind says, "This must stop now." But discomfort is not danger, it is information. When you stay with it, you learn its texture, you learn its limits, you learn that it changes. This learning builds resilience. You become less afraid of difficult states. You stop panicking when things feel off. You trust that you can remain present even when conditions are not ideal. Trusting reality also changes your relationship with uncertainty. You stop needing guarantees before you relax. You stop needing certainty before you breathe fully. Uncertainty becomes a space rather than a threat. This shift is subtle but profound. It means peace is no longer conditional. It does not depend on agreement, understanding, or approval. It depends on presence. Presence does not mean passivity. It means honesty. It means meeting what is here without pretending it should be something else. From this honesty, wise action becomes possible. This trust also reduces inner conflict. Many people live with constant self-argument. One part wants acceptance, another part wants control. Trusting reality allows these parts to coexist without domination. You can acknowledge resistance without obeying it. You might still think, "I don't like this." But that thought no longer dictates your state. It becomes information, not a command. This distinction changes how suffering is experienced. Suffering is often the result of refusing to be with what is present. Pain plus refusal equals suffering. Pain plus presence equals experience. Trust removes refusal. This does not mean pain disappears. It means pain is not amplified by inner conflict. You feel what you feel, and that is enough. Trusting reality without agreement also brings humility. You recognize that life is larger than your preferences. This humility is not self-erasure, it is alignment. You align with the fact that reality does not revolve around your comfort. This alignment creates a sense of belonging. You are no longer at odds with life. You are part of it even when you disagree with its current form. Over time, this trust becomes embodied. You no longer need to remind yourself. The body learns that it is safe to be here without conditions. This safety is not dependent on outcomes. It is rooted in presence. From this place, peace feels less fragile. It does not break when things go wrong. It does not disappear when emotions arise. It remains as a quiet background, supporting whatever comes. This peace is not dramatic. It does not feel like constant happiness. It feels like steadiness, a grounded sense that you can be here without needing life to change first. As this steadiness settles, another layer of freedom becomes visible. When you no longer need agreement to rest, you may notice that the search for purpose itself begins to loosen. The question of what this is all for starts to fade, making room for a deeper, quieter meaning that does not depend on answers at all. When trust no longer depends on agreement, another habit quietly loosens its grip. The mind no longer argues with the moment, but it may still ask something softer, something almost innocent. What is this all for? This question does not feel urgent, it feels thoughtful, yet it still leans forward, still reaches beyond what is here. And when this reaching relaxes, a different kind of freedom begins to unfold. There is a deep conditioning that says life must have a purpose you can name, that moments must point somewhere, that experiences are steps toward a goal. This belief shapes how people live more than they realize. It turns the present into preparation. It turns now into a means rather than a place to rest. Purpose-seeking often feels noble. It sounds meaningful. It sounds responsible. But it also creates a quiet dissatisfaction. If this moment is only valuable because of what it leads to, then it is never enough on its own. There is always a subtle sense of waiting, of not yet arriving. Not knowing what this is for can feel unsettling at first. The mind likes direction. It likes maps. It likes to feel that effort is justified. When purpose is unclear, the ego worries that time is being wasted, that life is slipping by without reason. But this worry comes from a misunderstanding. It assumes that meaning must be assigned from the outside. It assumes that value comes from future results. When these assumptions are questioned, something surprising happens. Meaning becomes quieter, deeper, and less fragile. Purpose-seeking often pulls attention away from experience. You are present, but only partially. Part of you is here. Part of you is checking whether this moment fits into a larger plan. This split creates tension. You are never fully where you are. Releasing the need to know what this is for brings attention back home. You stop scanning the horizon for justification. You start noticing what is already happening. This noticing is not passive. It is intimate. It brings you closer to life as it is. When purpose is not demanded, moments are allowed to be simple. A conversation does not have to lead somewhere. A feeling does not have to teach a lesson. A day does not have to be productive to be lived. This simplicity feels spacious. The mind often resists this space because it cannot control it. Without purpose, there is uncertainty. Without a goal, there is openness. The ego fears openness because it cannot define itself inside it. But awareness thrives there. There is also relief in not knowing what this is for. The pressure to extract meaning drops. You no longer have to turn every experience into a lesson. Life stops feeling like a test you might fail. This does not make life meaningless. It makes meaning less forced. Meaning begins to arise naturally, not as an answer, but as a feeling of connection. You feel connected to what you are doing, even if you cannot explain why. This connection is different from purpose. Purpose is directional. Connection is present. Purpose points forward. Connection stays here. When connection is strong, purpose is not missed. Not knowing what this is for also softens fear of the future. When you are not living for a specific outcome, uncertainty loses some of its threat. You are no longer betting your peace on how things turn out. This does not mean you stop planning. It means plans no longer define your worth or your peace. You can plan and still be present. You can move forward without abandoning now. There is also a deeper honesty that emerges when purpose-seeking fades. You stop pretending that you know what life is doing. You stop creating stories about destiny or lessons to comfort yourself. This honesty is grounding. It keeps you close to reality. Reality does not always explain itself. It unfolds. When you allow unfolding without demanding explanation, you become more flexible. You respond to what is needed instead of forcing life into a narrative. This flexibility supports resilience. When things change unexpectedly, you are less shaken. You are not relying on a specific meaning to feel okay. You were present. The freedom of not knowing what this is for also changes how you relate to effort. Effort becomes an expression rather than an investment. You do things because they feel right, not because they guarantee a result. This shift removes a lot of internal conflict. You stop questioning whether you're on the right path. You stop measuring progress against imagined milestones. You move with life instead of evaluating it constantly. There is also a kind of humility here. You accept that life may be larger than your understanding. This acceptance is not resignation, it is respect. You respect that existence does not revolve around your plans. This respect brings peace because it removes entitlement. You no longer expect life to deliver a specific outcome in exchange for your effort. You engage without contract. Engaging without contract allows joy to appear more freely. Joy no longer needs to justify itself. It can be small, it can be brief, it can appear in ordinary moments. It does not have to mean anything. The same is true for sadness. Sadness does not have to be reframed as growth. It can be felt as sadness. This honesty allows emotions to move naturally. When purpose-seeking fades, time feels different. You are less rushed. You are not trying to get somewhere else. This does not slow life down. It deepens it. Depth comes from attention. Attention comes from presence. Presence is easier when you are not waiting for meaning to arrive later. There is also a subtle confidence that grows here. Not confidence in identity or achievement, but confidence in being. You trust that being here is enough. You do not need to justify your existence through purpose. This confidence is quiet. It does not seek validation. It does not compare. It rests. Many spiritual traditions point to this without always naming it. They speak of being rather than becoming. They point to the simplicity of now. They suggest that the search for purpose can distract from the truth of presence. This does not mean rejecting purpose entirely. It means not clinging to it. Purpose can arise in certain phases of life. It can guide action, but it does not need to dominate every moment. When purpose is held lightly, it no longer creates pressure. It becomes flexible. It can change. It can dissolve. And when it dissolves, nothing essential is lost. What remains is a quiet sense of meaning that does not depend on explanation. This meaning is not conceptual. It is felt. It feels like belonging, like being part of something without needing to define it. This belonging is not earned. It is recognized. It was always present, covered by the noise of seeking. The freedom of not knowing what this is allows you to meet life without a script. You respond authentically. You are less predictable. You are more alive. This aliveness does not come from excitement. It comes from contact. You are touching life directly, not through the lens of purpose. As this freedom settles, another shift becomes visible. When you stop seeking purpose, you also stop trying to become something else. The idea that peace requires improvement begins to fade. This opens the next layer of understanding, where presence is no longer tied to achievement, growth, or spiritual progress, but is recognized as already complete. As the search for purpose loosens, another expectation quietly comes into question. Even without chasing meaning, many people still carry a hidden pressure. A pressure to grow, to improve, to become something more than they are now. When this pressure softens, presence reveals a freedom that does not depend on progress at all. There is a subtle ache that lives beneath many spiritual paths. It sounds gentle, even inspiring, but it never truly rests. It says, "One day I will arrive." It says, "I am not there yet." It dresses itself as growth, wisdom, or awakening, but underneath it carries dissatisfaction with what is already here. This is the belief that peace is earned through insight, earned through discipline, earned through becoming better, calmer, wiser, or more evolved. It sounds reasonable. After all, improvement is valued everywhere else in life. Why would inner peace be different? But presence does not work like achievement. It does not respond to effort in the way skills do. It does not accumulate through time. Presence is not a reward waiting at the end of development. It is what is already here before development begins. The idea of spiritual achievement turns peace into a future object, something to reach, something to maintain, something that can be lost. This keeps the mind subtly tense. Even when things feel calm, there is often a background worry. Is this enough? Am I doing this right? Am I progressing? These questions pull attention away from now. They place attention on an imagined version of yourself that does not yet exist. Presence is replaced by comparison. The moment is measured against an ideal. This ideal is often invisible. It is shaped by teachings, teachers, books, and stories of awakening. The mind creates an image of what peace should look like. It should be quiet. It should be stable. It should be free of doubt. When current experience does not match this image, dissatisfaction appears. This dissatisfaction is not caused by lack of peace. It is caused by the belief that peace should look different. That belief creates distance. It keeps peace just out of reach. Presence without spiritual achievement means recognizing that awareness does not improve. It does not mature. It does not become more itself. It is already complete. What changes is not awareness, but the stories we tell about it. Many people mistake the absence of struggle for achievement. When the mind quiets, it claims credit. I am more evolved now. This claim may feel harmless, but it reinforces the idea that peace belongs to a better version of you. It subtly reintroduces hierarchy. Hierarchy creates fear of loss. If peace is something you become, it can also be something you lose. This fear keeps the mind alert. It watches itself constantly. It monitors experience. True presence is replaced by self-surveillance. Presence does not require monitoring. It is effortless. It is here whether the mind is calm or busy, whether emotions are pleasant or painful, whether understanding is present or absent. Presence does not take sides. When peace is tied to spiritual achievement, ordinary moments are undervalued. Washing dishes becomes less important than meditation. Restlessness becomes a problem instead of a sensation. Human emotions are treated as obstacles instead of expressions of life. This creates division. Spiritual life is placed above ordinary life. The present moment is no longer enough unless it feels elevated. This division is subtle, but it keeps peace conditional. Presence without achievement dissolves this division. It recognizes that there is nothing wrong with being human. Thoughts are not failures. Emotions are not regressions. Confusion is not a lack of wisdom. These are natural movements within awareness. This recognition brings relief. You no longer have to perform spirituality. You no longer have to maintain a certain state. You can stop trying to look peaceful and start being present. Being present does not mean being calm all the time. It means being honest. It means meeting what is here without trying to turn it into something else. Calm may come, chaos may come, presence remains. There is also humility in this. When you stop trying to become better, you stop placing yourself above others. You stop measuring. You stop ranking experiences. This humility is not self-denial. It is equality with life. Equality with life means no moment is more sacred than another. Silence and noise are both allowed. Insight and confusion are both part of the flow. Nothing needs to be excluded for presence to exist. This approach also removes pressure from practice. Meditation becomes a place to notice what is here, not a tool to achieve a state. Stillness becomes something you recognize, not something you manufacture. When achievement is removed, effort softens. Effortlessness does not mean laziness. It means alignment. You are no longer pushing against yourself. You move with what is happening. This alignment allows deeper relaxation. The body senses that it does not need to improve to be okay. This safety settles the nervous system. When the body feels safe, presence deepens naturally. Presence without achievement also changes how you relate to teachers and teachings. You stop looking for someone to validate your progress. You stop comparing your experience to descriptions. You listen for resonance, not instruction. This does not mean rejecting guidance. It means not outsourcing your sense of completeness. You recognize that no one can give you what is already here. There is also freedom from disappointment. When peace is not a goal, it cannot be failed. When presence is not an achievement, there is nothing to lose. This freedom allows experimentation without fear. Fear often hides behind the drive to improve. Fear of being stuck, fear of being ordinary, fear of missing something important. When you see that presence does not depend on improvement, these fears lose strength. Ordinary becomes enough, not in a dull way, but in a grounded way. The present moment regains its richness. You stop overlooking it while waiting to become something else. This also restores compassion toward yourself. You stop judging your inner life. You stop labeling experiences as good or bad practice. You meet yourself as you are, not as you should be. This compassion naturally extends outward. When you stop judging your own state, you stop judging others. You see that everyone is moving through experience in their own way. There is less superiority, less comparison. Presence without achievement also reveals how the mind uses improvement as distraction. Focusing on becoming better keeps attention on the future. It avoids intimacy with now. When improvement is dropped, now becomes unavoidable. This can feel uncomfortable at first. Without the escape of becoming, you are face to face with what is here. But this discomfort is honest. It does not last forever. It opens into acceptance. Acceptance here does not mean liking everything. It means allowing everything. Allowance creates space. In that space, peace is not something added. It is something noticed. This peace is not special. That is why it is often overlooked. It does not sparkle. It does not announce itself. It feels like simplicity, like not needing to be anywhere else. The mind may resist this simplicity. It prefers complexity. It prefers effort. It prefers the story of progress. But when simplicity is trusted, effort relaxes on its own. Presence without achievement also removes the idea of spiritual failure. There is no wrong state. There is only what is present. Every state is an opportunity for awareness. This removes shame. Shame thrives on comparison and ideals. Without ideals, shame has no ground. The absence of shame creates openness. You are more willing to be honest. You are more willing to feel. You are more willing to stay. Staying is the heart of presence. Not staying to get somewhere, but staying because this is where life is happening. This staying reveals that peace was never missing. It was covered by effort, by ideals, by the belief that something else was required. As this understanding settles, presence feels less fragile. It does not disappear when you are distracted. It does not vanish when emotions rise. It remains as the space in which everything appears. This space is not personal. It does not belong to a better version of you. It belongs to no one. It is simply here. From this place, life feels less like a project and more like a participation. You are not trying to become worthy of the moment. You are already inside it. As this settles, another insight naturally arises. If peace does not require achievement, then perhaps the mind's constant drive to understand is not purely spiritual, but biological. Perhaps the demand for answers is tied not to wisdom, but to survival. Exploring this reveals how deeply the nervous system shapes our need for certainty and why understanding this can bring even more ease into presence. As the pressure to become something fades, another force quietly steps into view. It is older than belief, older than philosophy, and far more influential than most people realize. Even when the mind lets go of achievement and meaning, the body may still feel restless, still alert, still searching. This is where the demand for answers is no longer mental at its root, but biological. There is a common assumption that the need to understand is a sign of intelligence or depth. But much of the time, the urgency behind questions does not come from wisdom. It comes from the nervous system trying to protect you. The body senses uncertainty, and it reacts long before the mind forms a thought. Questioning is often the nervous system speaking through language. The nervous system has one main job: keep you alive. It scans constantly for danger, instability, and unpredictability. When it detects something unfamiliar or unclear, it activates. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, attention narrows, the body prepares to respond. This response is not logical, it is instinctive. In modern life, this activation rarely comes from physical threat. It comes from ambiguity, not knowing what is happening, not knowing what will happen next, not knowing where you stand. The nervous system treats uncertainty as potential danger. And when the body feels threatened, the mind starts asking questions. These questions sound philosophical. Why is this happening? What does this mean? What should I do? But beneath them is a simpler message. Am I safe? The mind looks for answers, because answers promise safety, they promise predictability, they promise control. This is why the demand for answers often comes with tension. It is not calm curiosity. It is urgency. It is the body saying, resolve this now. When the nervous system is activated, the mind cannot rest in not knowing. It needs closure. This is also why trying to reason your way into peace often fails. You may understand intellectually that not everything needs to be explained. But if the nervous system is still activated, the urge to question returns. Peace does not arrive through insight alone. It arrives when the body feels safe. Many people misunderstand this and turn questioning into a habit of identity. They believe they are deep thinkers or seekers of truth, but much of their seeking is driven by unregulated nervous energy. The body is unsettled, and the mind is trying to fix that through explanation. This is not a personal failure. It is how biology works. The nervous system evolved to respond quickly, not wisely. It prioritizes survival over truth. When something feels off, it demands resolution, even if resolution is impossible. This is why the mind often asks the same questions repeatedly without satisfaction. The nervous system is not looking for a perfect explanation. It is looking for relief. And explanations rarely provide lasting relief when the body is still tense. Understanding this changes how you relate to your thoughts. Instead of treating every question as meaningful, you begin to see them as signals. Signals of activation. Signals that something in the body needs attention. For example, when you are tired, hungry, or overstimulated, the mind becomes more anxious. It asks more questions. It worries more. It tries harder to make sense of things. This is not because life suddenly became more complex. It is because the nervous system has less capacity. This is why practices that calm the body often reduce overthinking more effectively than mental techniques. Slow breathing, gentle movement, rest. These signals tell the nervous system that it is safe. When the body relaxes, the mind stops demanding answers. The nervous system also remembers past experiences. If uncertainty was once paired with danger, the body learns to react strongly to not knowing. Trauma, stress, and instability leave imprints. The body becomes hyper-alert. It scans constantly. Questions become a form of vigilance. In these cases, philosophical questioning is not about truth. It is about control. The mind is trying to prevent pain by understanding everything in advance. It is trying to predict and manage life, so the body does not have to feel vulnerable again. This explains why some people cannot rest even when nothing is wrong. Their nervous system is conditioned to stay alert. Silence feels unsafe. Stillness feels threatening. The mind fills the space with questions to stay busy. When this is seen clearly, compassion arises. You stop judging yourself for overthinking. You recognize that the body is trying to protect you. This recognition alone can soften the cycle. The key is not to fight the nervous system, but to listen to it. When questions arise with urgency, instead of answering them, you can ask a different question. What does my body need right now? Often the answer is simple: rest, grounding, slower pace, reassurance. Reassurance does not mean explaining life, it means signaling safety. This can be done through touch, breath, warmth, and rhythm. These are the languages the nervous system understands. Words come later. When the nervous system feels safer, the mind naturally becomes quieter. Questions lose their charge. They may still appear, but they are not demanding. They do not pull you out of presence. This is why some people feel more peaceful in nature without understanding why. Nature provides steady, predictable rhythms. These rhythms calm the nervous system. When the body settles, the mind follows. Modern life often overwhelms the nervous system. Constant information, noise, speed, and uncertainty keep it activated. The mind responds by trying to make sense of everything. It becomes addicted to explanation. This addiction is not intellectual, it is physiological. The body is overstimulated, and the mind is trying to cope. Recognizing this shifts how you approach peace. Instead of chasing insight, you focus on regulation. You slow down, you create safety, you reduce unnecessary stimulation, you allow the body to settle. As the body settles, something important becomes clear. Many questions were never about truth, they were about tension. When the tension dissolves, the questions fade. This does not mean you stop thinking. It means thinking is no longer driven by fear. It becomes optional, flexible, useful when needed. This understanding also explains why spiritual teachings sometimes fail to land. They address the mind, but not the body. They speak about acceptance, but the nervous system is still activated. Without safety, acceptance feels impossible. When safety is restored, acceptance becomes natural. You stop needing to force yourself to be present. Presence arises because there is no threat. This also changes how you relate to difficult emotions. Emotions often trigger nervous system responses. Fear, anger, grief all activate the body. The mind responds by seeking explanations, but the fastest way through is often not understanding but regulation. Regulation does not mean suppression. It means supporting the body so it can process experience without overwhelm. When the body processes, emotions move. When emotions move, the mind does not need to intervene as much. This is why emotional pain can feel less confusing when you are rested and supported. The same situation feels manageable. The mind does not spiral. The body has capacity. Capacity is key. When capacity is low, questions multiply. When capacity is high, questions relax. Seeing questioning as a nervous system response removes shame. You stop believing that your mind is broken or obsessive. You see that it is responding to stress. This also removes the idea that peace is a mental achievement. Peace is not something you think your way into. It is something the body allows when it feels safe. This understanding brings humility. You realize that wisdom does not sit above biology. It includes it. Ignoring the body leads to spiritual bypassing. Including the body leads to integration. When you include the nervous system, peace becomes more stable. It is not dependent on constant insight. It is supported by physical regulation. This also explains why peace can disappear suddenly. A stressful event activates the nervous system and the mind returns to questioning. This is not failure, it is biology. Seeing this prevents self-judgment. Over time, as you learn to regulate rather than explain, trust deepens. You trust that not knowing is safe. You trust that you do not need answers to survive this moment. This trust is felt physically. The body relaxes into uncertainty. The mind stops bracing. From this place, questions may still arise, but they are softer. They do not demand immediate answers. They do not pull you away from experience. This softness opens the door to a deeper form of peace. A peace that is not achieved through understanding, but through safety, a peace that can hold confusion without urgency. As this becomes clear, another misunderstanding begins to dissolve. The idea that non-resistance means passivity, seeing how to allow without collapsing, how to surrender without giving up, opens the next layer of understanding, where non-resistance is revealed as a form of deep intelligence rather than weakness. As the nervous system settles and the urgency for answers fades, a new misunderstanding often appears. When the body relaxes and the mind stops fighting reality, it can feel like something is being lost. People begin to worry that letting go of resistance means giving up, giving in, or becoming inactive. This fear blocks a deeper peace that only appears when non-resistance is clearly understood. There is a deep confusion between surrender and resignation. They look similar on the surface, but inside they are completely different experiences. Resignation feels heavy. It feels like collapse. It carries bitterness, defeat, and a quiet sense of being trapped. Surrender, on the other hand, feels open. It carries clarity, softness, and a strange strength that does not need to prove itself. Non-resistance is not doing nothing. It is stopping the inner fight with what already exists. The fight does not change reality. It only drains energy. When that energy is no longer wasted on resistance, it becomes available for response. Resistance always begins internally. Before any action is taken, the mind says, "This should not be happening." The body tightens, the breath shortens, attention narrows. From this state, action becomes reactive. It is rushed, emotional, and often ineffective. Non-resistance removes this internal friction. It does not say the situation is good or acceptable. It simply says, "This is what is happening right now." That statement alone changes everything. It aligns awareness with reality instead of against it. From alignment, clarity emerges. When you are no longer arguing with the moment, you can see it clearly. You can sense what is needed. Action becomes precise instead of desperate. Many people fear non-resistance because they associate resistance with strength. They believe that if they stop pushing, they will be overwhelmed. But pushing against reality does not make you strong. It makes you tense. Real strength appears when you stop wasting energy on denial. Resignation feels like shutting down. Surrender feels like opening up. In resignation, the heart closes. In surrender, the heart stays open, even in difficulty. This difference can be felt in the body. Resignation is heavy, collapsed, dull. Surrender is relaxed, alert, and grounded. One drains life, the other supports it. Non-resistance is not about tolerating harm. It is about seeing clearly. When you resist internally, you often miss what is actually happening. You are too busy fighting the idea of the moment to respond wisely to the moment itself. For example, when someone treats you unfairly, resistance creates inner noise. Anger, stories, blame, replay. This noise clouds judgment. You may react aggressively or freeze. Non-resistance quiets the noise. You still see the unfairness, but without distortion. From that clarity, you can speak firmly, set boundaries, or walk away. This is why non-resistance often leads to more effective action. Action is no longer fueled by emotional pressure. It is guided by understanding. Surrender does not remove choice, it removes inner conflict. Choice becomes clearer when the mind is not divided against reality. There is also a misunderstanding that surrender means liking what is happening. It does not. You can deeply dislike a situation and still surrender to the fact that it exists. Surrender is about acknowledging reality, not approving of it. Approval says, "This is good." Surrender says, "This is here." These are not the same. When you stop resisting internally, the body feels safer. Safety allows intelligence to function. The nervous system moves out of emergency mode. This is when creativity and insight become available. Resistance narrows perception, surrender widens it. You see more options, you notice subtle details, you are less trapped in black and white thinking. Non-resistance also protects energy. Fighting reality is exhausting. It consumes mental and emotional resources without changing anything. Surrender conserves energy. That energy can then be used for care, action, and healing. Many spiritual practitioners struggle here because they mistake non-resistance for weakness. They worry that if they stop pushing, nothing will change. But change rarely comes from force. It comes from clarity and persistence. Non-resistance allows persistence without burnout. You keep showing up, but without the inner war. There is also a moral confusion around surrender. People worry that surrender means allowing injustice, but inner surrender does not determine outer action. You can surrender internally while taking strong external action. In fact, the most effective action often comes from non-resistance. History shows that movements rooted in clarity and calm endurance often outlast those driven by rage alone. Resignation gives up because it feels powerless. Surrender acts because it is grounded. One collapses, the other stands steady. This distinction is important in personal pain as well. When pain arises, resistance says, "This should not be happening." The body tightens, the pain intensifies. Resignation says, "Nothing can be done," and shuts down. Surrender says, "This is here," and stays present. From presence, the pain is allowed to move. Movement is key. Resistance freezes, resignation numbs, surrender allows flow. Non-resistance does not remove difficulty. It removes the second layer of suffering created by fighting difficulty. This second layer is often heavier than the first. It is made of judgment, fear, and self-attack. When this layer dissolves, the original challenge feels more manageable. There is also dignity in surrender. You stop pleading with reality to be different. You meet it as an equal. This dignity restores self-respect. Self-respect does not come from control. It comes from honesty. You respect yourself when you stop lying about what is happening. Non-resistance also changes how you experience failure. Failure is often resisted intensely. The mind creates shame and blame. When failure is surrendered to, it becomes information rather than identity. Information can be used. Identity becomes a prison. Surrender frees you from needing to be right. It frees you from needing to win against life. This freedom is deeply calming. It also reduces fear. Much fear comes from anticipating resistance. When you trust that you can meet whatever arises without fighting it internally, fear loses its grip. This does not mean you enjoy everything. It means you trust your capacity to stay. Staying is an active process. It requires attention, honesty, and courage. It is not passive. Non-resistance is a form of participation. You participate in life as it unfolds, instead of standing against it. This participation is fluid. You adapt. You adjust. You respond. You do not collapse. Many people experience surrender during moments they could not avoid. Illness, loss, big change. At first, there is resistance. Eventually, something gives way. When it does, there is often a surprising calm beneath the pain. That calm is surrender. This calm does not mean the situation is resolved. It means the inner fight has stopped. From there, healing becomes possible. Surrender also allows grief to move naturally. Grief resisted becomes depression. Grief surrendered becomes mourning. Mourning moves. Depression stagnates. This distinction matters deeply. Non-resistance also affects relationships. When you stop resisting others internally, you listen more clearly. You stop trying to change them in your head. This does not mean you accept harmful behavior. It means you see people as they are, not as you wish they were. Seeing clearly allows better boundaries. Resignation avoids boundaries because it feels hopeless. Surrender creates boundaries because it is honest. This honesty builds trust, both with yourself and others. Over time, practicing non-resistance builds inner strength. You realize that you do not break when things are difficult. You bend, you adapt, you remain present. This strength is quiet. It does not need to prove itself. As non-resistance becomes embodied, life feels less like a battle and more like a conversation. You listen, you respond, you pause, you move. From this place, another shift becomes visible. When you stop fighting the moment, you may notice that each moment is already complete on its own. It does not need to lead somewhere else to be valid. Seeing the moment as whole, rather than a step towards something else, opens the next layer of peace. When the inner fight finally stops, something subtle but profound becomes visible. The moment no longer feels like an obstacle or a problem to move through. It no longer feels like a delay before something better arrives. There is a quiet shift where the present stops asking to be justified by the future. This shift opens a way of seeing that changes everything. Most people live as if the current moment is unfinished business. It is treated like a hallway, a bridge, a waiting room, something you pass through on the way to something else. This habit is so deep that it feels natural. You wake up to get through the morning, you work to get to the weekend, you rest to prepare for the next task. Even calm is often treated as a break before activity resumes. Seeing the moment as a complete event means recognizing that nothing is missing from now. This does not mean nothing will happen next. It means this moment does not exist only to serve the next one. It stands on its own. This way of seeing goes against conditioning. From a young age, we are taught to focus on outcomes. Finish your homework so you can relax. Learn this so you can succeed later. Improve yourself so you can be happy one day. These lessons are practical, but when they become a worldview, they steal presence. When every moment is seen as a fragment, attention is always divided. Part of you is here, part of you is ahead. This division creates restlessness. You are never fully in your life. You are always preparing for it. The idea that the moment is incomplete fuels anxiety. If now is not enough, then peace must wait. Joy must wait. Satisfaction must wait. Life becomes a constant rehearsal that never turns into the performance. Seeing the moment as complete does not mean denying continuity. Life does unfold in time. Actions have consequences, but the meaning of the moment is not dependent on what comes next. Its reality is already whole. This wholeness can be felt directly. When you stop asking what this moment leads to, attention settles. Sensation becomes clearer. Sound is just sound. Breath is just breath. There is no extra demand placed on experience. This clarity does not come from effort. It comes from dropping a habit. The habit of leaning forward. Leaning forward is subtle. It shows up as checking the time, as mentally planning while someone is speaking, as waiting for a feeling to change. These movements fragment attention. They turn now into a means. When leaning forward stops, even briefly, there is relief. The body relaxes, the mind quiets. Not because something was achieved, but because something was released. Seeing the moment as whole also changes how difficulty is experienced. Pain is no longer seen as something to endure until relief arrives. It is met as a full experience in itself. This does not make pain pleasant, but it makes it honest. When pain is treated as a fragment, it is always compared to a future without pain. This comparison intensifies suffering. When pain is met as a complete event, it is allowed to exist without argument. This reduces the second layer of suffering created by resistance. The same is true for joy. Joy treated as a fragment becomes fragile. The mind tries to hold it, fearing its end. Joy treated as complete is enjoyed fully without clinging. It is allowed to come and go. This approach removes the pressure to extract value from experience. You do not have to make moments productive, meaningful, or useful. You allow them to be what they are. This allowance creates space. Space is essential for peace. When moments are treated as stepping stones, space disappears. Everything becomes tight, directional, goal-driven. When moments are complete, space opens naturally. This space is not emptiness, it is fullness without urgency. It holds whatever is present without pushing it forward. Seeing the moment as complete also changes how you relate to identity. Identity often relies on narrative, on continuity across time. When attention rests in the completeness of now, identity loosens. You are less defined by who you were or who you will be. You are simply here. This does not erase memory or responsibility. It shifts emphasis. You are no longer living primarily from story. You are living from contact. Contact is direct. It does not require interpretation. It does not need a destination. It is enough. This is why children often appear present. They are not yet conditioned to treat moments as means. They engage fully because they are not waiting for something else. Over time, this presence is trained out of us. Recovering it does not require becoming childlike. It requires unlearning the habit of postponement. Postponement often hides behind responsibility. I'll relax after this. I'll enjoy this later. These thoughts may be practical at times, but when they become constant, life becomes perpetually deferred. Seeing the moment as complete restores balance. You can still plan and act, but you are not absent while doing so. You are here while moving forward. This changes how effort feels. Effort is no longer strained. It becomes an expression of the moment rather than a means to escape it. Work done from presence feels different. It is more focused, less frantic. You are not trying to get out of now. You are engaged with it. Rest also feels different. It is not recovery for future performance. It is simply rest. The body receives it fully. Relationships shift as well. When you stop treating interactions as steps toward outcomes, you listen more deeply. You stop rushing conversations. You allow connection to happen without agenda. This does not make you passive. It makes you attentive. Seeing the moment as complete also dissolves a subtle form of greed. Greed for the next experience. Greed for improvement. Greed for resolution. When now is enough, greed relaxes. This relaxation brings contentment, not excitement, not euphoria, but a steady okayness, a sense that nothing needs to be added. This contentment is often mistaken for stagnation, but it is not stagnant. It is grounded. From groundedness, movement is more natural. Movement that arises from completeness is different from movement driven by lack. It is less desperate. It is more responsive. This is why creativity often flows when you are not chasing results. When the moment is complete, creativity has space to emerge. When you are always aiming ahead, creativity is pressured. Seeing the moment as complete also changes how time is experienced. Time feels less like a race and more like a rhythm. You move with it instead of against it. This rhythm includes pauses, silence, stillness. These are no longer seen as empty gaps. They are full moments too. Many people feel uncomfortable in stillness because they treat it as waiting for something to happen. When stillness is seen as complete, discomfort fades. Stillness becomes restful rather than tense. This restfulness supports clarity. From rest, insight arises naturally, not as something you force, but as something that appears. The mind often resists this because it fears irrelevance. It worries that if moments are complete, nothing will progress. But progress does not disappear. It simply stops dominating. Progress becomes a natural unfolding rather than a demand. This shift also softens regret. When moments are treated as complete, the past is not seen as a series of failures or missed opportunities. Each moment was what it was. It does not need to justify itself now. This does not mean ignoring consequences. It means releasing the belief that life should have gone differently for you to be at peace now. Peace in this view is not the result of a perfect sequence of moments. It is the recognition of completeness in each one. This recognition does not happen all at once. It appears in glimpses, moments where you stop leaning forward, moments where now feels enough. Over time, these glimpses become more frequent. You notice when the mind starts treating the moment as a fragment. You gently return. This return is not effortful. It is a remembering that life is happening here, not later. As this way of seeing settles, another subtle pattern begins to reveal itself. Even when moments are seen as complete, The mind often fills them with commentary, a constant inner narration that keeps experience one step removed. Seeing how this narration distances you from aliveness opens the next layer of peace, where the habit of mental commentary itself begins to fall away. As the moment begins to feel whole on its own, another movement quietly reveals itself. Even when nothing is missing, even when now feels complete, the mind may still lean forward, not because something is wrong, but because it has learned to keep moving. This movement often looks harmless. It looks curious. It looks like growth. But beneath it, there is often a subtle anxiety asking to be seen. Curiosity is usually praised. It is associated with intelligence, openness, and learning. And true curiosity is gentle. It explores without urgency. It stays close to experience. But there is another kind of curiosity that feels similar on the surface and very different underneath. This curiosity does not rest. It searches, it seeks, it keeps asking, what else, even when nothing is lacking. This form of curiosity is not driven by wonder. It is driven by unease. It arises from a feeling that staying still might be dangerous. That if you stop seeking, something important will be missed. That growth must be constant to avoid stagnation. This anxiety is often invisible because it is productive. It reads books, it listens to talks, it reflects endlessly, it asks deep questions. From the outside, it looks like dedication. From the inside, it often feels restless. The key difference between genuine curiosity and anxious seeking is timing. Genuine curiosity arises naturally and fades naturally. Anxious curiosity never finishes. Each insight leads immediately to another question. Each answer opens another gap. There is no satisfaction, only momentum. This momentum can feel exciting, but it also keeps the nervous system activated. The mind stays alert, scanning for the next thing to understand. Even moments of clarity are quickly consumed. They become stepping stones instead of places to rest. This is why some people feel exhausted by personal growth. They are always learning, always improving, always seeking the next insight. But the body never relaxes. The search never ends. The anxiety hidden inside curiosity often comes from a fear of stopping. Stopping feels like falling behind. It feels like losing identity. Many people define themselves as seekers, thinkers, or explorers. To stop seeking feels like disappearing. This fear is rarely acknowledged because seeking is socially rewarded. People praise those who are always growing. They admire curiosity. Few question whether the growth is driven by joy or fear. Anxious curiosity often begins early. Children learn that asking questions brings attention and approval. Over time, questioning becomes a way to feel safe, connected, and valued. Later in life, the habit remains, but the context changes. Questions are now aimed inward and outward at life itself. This habit intensifies during uncertainty. When the future is unclear, curiosity spikes. The mind searches for information, insight, or understanding to regain control. This search feels intelligent, but it is often a stress response. When curiosity is driven by anxiety, it pulls attention away from direct experience. You are always learning about life instead of living it. You are always thinking about thinking. You are always reflecting instead of resting. This does not mean reflection is wrong. It means reflection can become compulsive. When it does, it stops serving clarity and starts serving fear. Fear does not always feel dramatic. It can feel like interest, like motivation, like drive. But its signature is urgency, a subtle pressure that says, keep going, don't stop. There is more you need to know. True curiosity has no pressure. It does not mind pausing. It does not fear stillness. It can stop without panic. Anxious curiosity cannot stop because stopping exposes what it has been avoiding. When seeking pauses, there is often a feeling underneath, a sense of emptiness, a sense of not knowing who you are without the search, a quiet discomfort that the search was covering. This discomfort is not a problem, it is an invitation. It points to something that wants to be felt, not solved. When curiosity slows down, presence deepens. You notice the body more, you notice the breath, you notice subtle emotions that were previously drowned out by thinking. This can feel unfamiliar because the mind was used to being busy. The anxiety hidden in curiosity also shows up in spiritual practice. People jump from technique to technique, teacher to teacher, insight to insight. Each promises something. Each is sampled briefly before moving on. The body never settles long enough to integrate. This pattern is often justified as openness. I like to explore. But exploration without rest becomes escape. You are not opening, you are avoiding. Avoiding what? Often avoiding simplicity, avoiding the quiet that reveals nothing is missing, avoiding the ordinariness of presence. Presence can feel too plain for an anxious mind. It does not offer stimulation. It does not promise progress. It does not confirm identity. For a mind used to seeking, this feels threatening. The anxious seeker believes that stopping means stagnation, but stopping is not stagnation, it is digestion. Without digestion, growth is superficial. Insights pile up without depth. Depth requires staying. Staying with one experience long enough for it to change you. Staying without searching for the next thing. This staying is what anxious curiosity resists. It wants novelty, it wants movement, it wants reassurance through change. Reassurance through change never lasts. Each new insight brings temporary relief, followed by renewed hunger. This cycle mirrors addiction. The object is different, but the pattern is the same. Seeing this pattern clearly is liberating. You stop romanticizing your restlessness. You stop confusing movement with growth. You begin to ask a different question. What am I afraid will happen if I stop seeking? Often the answer is simple and honest. I'm afraid I'll feel lost. I'm afraid I'll feel empty. I'm afraid I'll miss something important. These fears are not intellectual. They are emotional. Meeting these fears requires presence, not answers. It requires staying with the feeling of not knowing without immediately turning it into a project. This is uncomfortable at first. The mind reaches for stimulation. It wants something to chew on. When it does not get it, it complains. This is normal. If you stay, something surprising happens. The discomfort begins to soften. The need to seek relaxes. You realize that you are still here without searching. You are still alive, still aware, still connected. This realization weakens the belief that seeking is necessary for safety. Safety begins to be found in presence instead. Curiosity then changes quality. It becomes slower, quieter, more embodied. You may still ask questions, but they are not urgent. They arise from interest, not fear. This kind of curiosity does not pull you away from life. It brings you closer. You explore what is here, not what might be elsewhere. The anxiety hidden inside curiosity also affects how people consume information. Endless scrolling, endless learning, endless content. The mind keeps feeding, hoping for satisfaction. The body becomes overstimulated. When this pattern is seen, you may notice a natural desire to reduce input, not out of discipline, but out of fatigue. The system wants rest. Rest is not the opposite of curiosity. It is its ground. Without rest, curiosity becomes frantic. With rest, curiosity becomes clear. This clarity allows discernment. You no longer chase every question. You sense which ones matter and which ones are noise. Noise often sounds important. It says, you need to know this. Discernment says, you can let this pass. Letting questions pass without answering them is a skill. It feels counterintuitive. The mind believes unanswered questions are dangerous, But most questions dissolve on their own when not fed. This is especially true for questions driven by anxiety. When you stop responding to them, they lose energy. They fade like echoes. This does not make you dull or closed. It makes you selective. Your attention becomes valuable again. Attention is the currency of peace. Where it goes, energy follows. When attention is scattered by anxious curiosity, peace fragments. When attention rests, peace gathers. Gathering does not mean focusing narrowly. It means being whole. You are not split between now and later, here and elsewhere. This wholeness allows joy to appear quietly. Not the joy of discovery, but the joy of being present. This joy does not spike, it hums. Anxious curiosity often chases peak experiences. It wants transformation. It wants breakthrough. It wants something dramatic. But peace often arrives as subtle satisfaction. This satisfaction does not impress the mind. It does not make a story, but it nourishes deeply. As anxious curiosity loosens, you may notice boredom. This boredom is not emptiness. It is the mind adjusting to less stimulation. If you stay with it, it often opens into calm. Calm does not feel like growth, but it supports everything. From calm, learning integrates. From calm, action becomes precise. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop panicking about growth. You trust that life unfolds without constant seeking. Trust is the opposite of anxious curiosity. Trust allows pauses. Trust allows silence. Trust allows not knowing. This trust was already developing when you saw the moment as complete. Now it deepens. You no longer treat curiosity as a requirement. You allow it to come and go. This flexibility frees you from the identity of seeker. You are no longer someone chasing something. You are someone participating. Participation feels fuller than pursuit. You are inside life, not chasing it. As this becomes clear, another layer of peace opens. When seeking quiets, life no longer needs to be translated into words. You allow it to remain wordless. Allowing reality to be inarticulate without rushing to explain or label it opens a deeper stillness that does not depend on understanding at all. As the restless edge of seeking softens, something quieter becomes noticeable. There are moments when life does not want to be understood, moments that resist explanation, that fall apart when you try to name them. When curiosity no longer pushes forward, you begin to sense that words themselves can become an interruption. This is where a different relationship with reality begins, one that does not require language to feel complete. There is a deep habit of turning experience into words as quickly as possible. A feeling arises and the mind labels it. A moment passes and the mind describes it. An event happens and the mind explains it. This habit feels natural, but it creates distance. Life is lived twice, once as experience and again as commentary. Over time, the commentary begins to replace the experience itself. Letting reality be inarticulate means allowing experience to remain raw, undefined, and unfinished. It means resisting the urge to translate life into concepts immediately. This is not a rejection of language, but a recognition of its limits. Words are tools, not mirrors. They point, but they do not contain. When you rush to label experience, you shrink it. A complex feeling becomes a single word. A layered moment becomes a simple story. This simplification helps the mind feel oriented, but it often costs depth. Something alive becomes static. Many people feel uneasy when experience remains wordless. Silence feels awkward. Not knowing how to describe something feels like failure. But this discomfort comes from habit, not necessity. Reality existed before language, and it continues beyond it. There are moments you already know this. A powerful piece of music. A deep connection with another person. A sudden wave of grief or joy. When you try to describe these moments, something essential slips away. The description feels thin compared to the experience. This is not because you lack the right words. It is because words cannot hold everything. Letting life remain wordless allows it to breathe. You stop pinning it down. You stop reducing it to something manageable. You allow it to move, shift, and change without needing to be captured. This does not mean becoming vague or disconnected. It means staying close enough that words feel unnecessary, close enough that sensation, emotion, and perception speak for themselves. The urge to explain often comes from discomfort. When something feels intense, unfamiliar, or unclear, the mind tries to stabilize it with language. Naming gives a sense of control. Explanation gives a sense of closure, but closure is not always what is needed. Sometimes openness is more honest. When you allow reality to remain inarticulate, you give yourself permission not to know. This permission is deeply calming. It removes the pressure to be clear, to be certain, to be articulate. You no longer have to present your life as a coherent story. This is especially important with inner experience. Emotions do not always arrive with clear definitions. They blend, overlap, and contradict. When you label them too quickly, you impose order that may not fit. This can create confusion instead of clarity. Staying with the felt sense of an emotion without naming it allows it to unfold naturally. You notice where it lives in the body. You notice how it changes. You notice when it fades. This direct contact often resolves more than analysis ever could. Letting reality be inarticulate also changes how you listen to others. Instead of immediately interpreting what someone says, you listen to tone, pauses, and energy. You sense what is underneath the words. This kind of listening creates deeper connection. Language can be useful, but it often arrives too late. By the time you name something, it has already moved. Staying with experience before words allows you to meet it while it is alive. This approach also reveals how much mental noise comes from constant labeling. The mind narrates everything. This is good. This is bad. This means something. This doesn't matter. This narration feels helpful, but it often blocks intimacy with life. When narration quiets, perception sharpens. You see colors more clearly. You hear sounds more distinctly. You feel sensations more fully. Life becomes vivid, not because it is more exciting, but because nothing is standing between you and it. There is also humility in letting reality remain inarticulate. You accept that not everything can be captured by thought. You accept that your understanding is partial. This humility is freeing. You no longer have to pretend to know. This does not make you ignorant. It makes you honest. Many people fear that without labels, life will feel chaotic. But chaos often comes from overthinking, not from direct experience. When you stay with what is happening without commentary, there is often a natural order, a rhythm, a flow. This flow is easier to sense when the mind is quiet. It guides action without explanation. You know when to speak. You know when to pause. You know when to move and when to rest. This knowing does not come from words. It comes from attunement. Letting reality be inarticulate also softens judgment. When you stop labeling experiences as right or wrong, you meet them with curiosity instead of resistance. This does not mean you stop having values. It means you stop reacting automatically. Automatic reactions are often fueled by labels. This is unacceptable. This is dangerous. This is embarrassing. When labels soften, reactions slow. You gain space to respond wisely. This space is where peace lives, not in explanations, but in openness. There is also a creative dimension to this. Creativity thrives in spaces that are not yet defined. When you rush to label, you close possibilities. When you allow ambiguity, new responses emerge. This is why many artists and thinkers value silence. Silence allows ideas to gestate without pressure. It allows insight to arise without being forced. In daily life, letting reality be inarticulate can feel strange at first. You may notice the urge to describe your experience internally. You may feel restless when you do not do so. This restlessness is a habit loosening. If you stay with it, it often dissolves. As it dissolves, a quiet enjoyment appears. Not excitement, but appreciation. You are present without needing to say anything about it. This enjoyment does not need to be shared or explained. It is enough to feel it. This also changes how you relate to problems. Problems are often created by language. A situation becomes a problem when it is labeled as one. When you stay with the raw facts without interpretation, the situation may still require action, but it feels less overwhelming. You see what needs to be done without dramatizing it. Action becomes simple. Letting reality be inarticulate also changes how you experience silence. Silence is no longer empty or awkward. It becomes full. It holds presence, awareness, and connection. In silence, you are not waiting for words. You are resting in being. This rest is not passive, it is alert and alive. You are aware without effort. This awareness does not need to comment on itself. It does not need to announce its presence. It simply is. Over time, you may notice that words begin to feel heavier, not because they are bad, but because you no longer rely on them for grounding. You use them when needed, and you release them when they are not. This flexibility brings ease. You are not trapped in thought. You are not rejecting thought either. You are free to move between silence and language. This freedom allows deeper communication. When you do speak, words come from experience, not from habit. They are simpler, more precise, less defensive. Letting reality remain wordless also supports acceptance. Acceptance does not require explanation. It requires presence. When you are present, you do not need to convince yourself that things are okay. You simply meet them. This meeting can include discomfort. It can include uncertainty. But it does not include argument. Argument requires language. Presence does not. This does not mean becoming mute or withdrawn. It means knowing when words help and when they hinder. Many conflicts are fueled by premature interpretation. When you allow a moment to remain undefined, conflict often softens. Misunderstandings dissolve before they harden. This is especially true internally. When you stop explaining yourself to yourself, you stop reinforcing patterns. You allow new responses to emerge. This emergence feels natural. It does not need justification. As this way of being settles, peace feels less fragile. It is not tied to understanding or expression. It is tied to openness. Openness does not mean exposure without boundaries. It means receptivity without judgment. From this openness, life feels closer. You are no longer watching it through words. You are touching it directly. This directness is simple. That simplicity is often mistaken for emptiness, but it is full of sensation, full of awareness, full of presence. As you become more comfortable letting reality be inarticulate, another shift becomes possible. You begin to notice that peace does not disappear when confusion arises. It does not require certainty or stability. It can survive not knowing. Exploring this reveals a peace that remains even when clarity is absent, a peace that does not depend on comfort at all. As words loosen their grip and reality is allowed to remain undefined, something unexpected becomes clear. Confusion does not automatically destroy peace. In fact, confusion only feels threatening when peace is tied to certainty. When peace is no longer dependent on clarity, a deeper steadiness begins to show itself, one that does not collapse when answers disappear. Most people believe peace comes after things settle, after emotions calm down, after life makes sense, after uncertainty resolves. This belief turns peace into a fragile state that depends on conditions. The moment those conditions change, peace disappears. What remains is anxiety, tension, and the feeling of being lost. But there is another kind of peace, a quieter one. It does not announce itself with calm emotions or clear thoughts. It does not require stability. It does not wait for confusion to end. It exists underneath all of it. This peace survives confusion because it is not built from understanding, it is built from presence. Presence does not need certainty to function. It does not need emotional comfort to remain. It only needs honesty. Confusion feels uncomfortable because the mind equates not knowing with danger. When things are unclear, the nervous system tightens, thoughts race, the body prepares for threat. This reaction is learned and automatic, but it does not mean something is wrong. Confusion is simply a state where the old map no longer fits. It means life is changing faster than the mind can categorize. This is not failure, it is transition. Peace that survives confusion allows this transition without panic. It does not try to force clarity. It does not rush to rebuild certainty. It stays. Staying with confusion requires trust. Not trust that things will turn out well, but trust that you can remain present without knowing. This trust is felt in the body as softness rather than tension. When peace depends on certainty, confusion feels unbearable. The mind keeps searching for answers to regain control. This searching creates more noise, more confusion, more exhaustion. Peace is postponed. When peace is independent of certainty, confusion becomes workable. You do not need to resolve it immediately. You do not need to escape it. You allow it to exist while you stay connected. This connection changes everything. You stop interpreting confusion as a personal problem. You stop assuming it means something is wrong with you. You see it as a phase, not an identity. There is also a relief in not needing to feel emotionally comfortable to be at peace. Many people believe peace means feeling good, calm, light, positive. When difficult emotions arise, they assume peace is gone. But emotional comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort is a feeling. Peace is a relationship with experience. You can be uncomfortable and still at peace. You can feel grief, fear, or anger without losing your ground. This does not mean suppressing emotions. It means not making them enemies. You allow them to move without interpreting them as threats to your well-being. Peace that survives confusion is not numb. It feels deeply. But it does not collapse into reaction. It holds space. This kind of peace often feels subtle at first. It does not feel like relief. It feels like steadiness, a sense that you are still here even when things are unclear. This steadiness is often overlooked because it does not match expectations. People look for peace as an emotional high. When they do not find it, they assume it is absent. But peace is often quiet. Quiet does not mean weak, it means unshaken. When confusion arises, you may notice the urge to fix it, to understand it, to talk it out, to think it through. These impulses are natural, but peace does not depend on satisfying them. You can allow the urge to fix confusion without acting on it immediately. You can feel the discomfort without turning it into a project. This restraint is not avoidance, it is wisdom. Wisdom here is knowing when clarity is needed and when presence is enough. Many situations do not require immediate understanding. They require patience. Patience is often misunderstood as waiting passively. In reality, patience is active presence without interference. It is staying with what is unfolding without forcing it to resolve. This patience allows clarity to arise organically. When the mind stops pushing, insight often comes later, in a quieter form. But even if it does not, peace remains. This is the key difference. Peace that survives confusion does not depend on insight. Insight may come or go. Peace stays. This kind of peace is deeply stabilizing. It allows you to move through life's uncertain phases without losing yourself. You may feel disoriented, but you are not destroyed by it. Disorientation becomes part of growth rather than a sign of failure. You recognize that not knowing is often a doorway, not a dead end. Many life transitions involve confusion, changes in identity, changes in relationships, changes in belief. If peace depends on certainty, these transitions become crises. If peace survives confusion, these transitions become passages. This peace also changes how you relate to decisions. You stop needing perfect clarity before acting. You make the best choice you can with the information you have. You trust your ability to adjust. This trust reduces paralysis. When peace is tied to certainty, indecision becomes torture. When peace is independent, indecision becomes tolerable. You may still prefer clarity, but you are no longer desperate for it. Peace that survives confusion also softens self-judgment. You stop criticizing yourself for not knowing. You stop measuring your worth by how confident you feel. Confidence becomes less important than presence. You can be unsure and still grounded. You can be lost and still alive. This is especially important during emotional turbulence. Emotions often create confusion. They blur perception. When peace depends on emotional stability, emotional waves feel dangerous. But emotions are movements, not foundations. Peace does not need emotions to settle before it can exist. It can hold emotion without being consumed by it. This does not make you detached. It makes you resilient. Resilience is not about avoiding difficulty, it is about staying intact within it. Peace that survives confusion also affects how you relate to others. You become more patient with their uncertainty. You stop demanding clarity from them. You listen more openly. This openness reduces conflict. Many conflicts arise from intolerance of ambiguity. When people need things to be clear, they push. When they can tolerate confusion, they soften. This does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means approaching them without panic. Peace in confusion allows you to speak honestly without needing immediate resolution. You can say, "I don't know yet." You can say, "This is unclear." These statements become expressions of presence rather than weakness. There is dignity in admitting confusion. It shows trust in the process of life. Peace that survives confusion also brings creativity. When certainty drops, new possibilities appear. The mind is less constrained. You explore without fear of being wrong. Fear of being wrong often comes from tying peace to correctness. When peace does not depend on being right, exploration becomes playful. This playfulness does not mean carelessness, it means openness. Open systems adapt better than rigid ones. Peace that survives confusion allows adaptation. Over time, this peace becomes familiar. You stop bracing against uncertainty. You stop needing reassurance. You settle into the understanding that confusion is not an emergency. This settling does not make life predictable. It makes you adaptable. Adaptability is more valuable than certainty. Certainty breaks when conditions change. Adaptability flows. This peace is not dramatic. It does not remove all discomfort, but it removes panic. It removes the sense that something must be fixed immediately. From this place, life feels more navigable. You move step by step instead of needing the whole map. This step-by-step living is grounded. You respond to what is here rather than worrying about what is missing. Peace was never hiding in answers. It was waiting in the moments you stopped demanding them. When the need to understand softened, the fight with reality ended. When the stories fell apart, you discovered you were still here. When confusion arrived, peace stayed. When pain moved without explanation, it healed. When the mind stopped judging the moment, life opened. This teaching is simple but not easy. Stop forcing meaning. Stop asking life to justify itself. Stop waiting for certainty before you rest. Peace does not come from knowing. It appears when you stop demanding answers from the moment. If something in this journey touched you, leave a comment below and write, "I choose peace over answers." I read every comment and your words matter here. And if this kind of teaching helps you slow down, breathe, and see life more clearly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so these reminders find you when you need them most. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay present.